All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Grafton Select Board meeting, January 6, 2021. Open the meeting today at 5:03 p.m. Just as a preliminary matter, my name is Peter Carlson. I'll be the chair of the Town of Grafton Select Board. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Select Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Prisby?
Here.
Ms. Roy?
Right here.
Mr. Otham, he said he's going to be a few minutes late, and Peter Carlson is here. And tonight, anticipated speakers, when I please call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Bernie Lynch from Paradigm Associates.
Here.
And beginning tonight with us would be Mr. Brassard.
Here.
Candidate.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Town of Grafton Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. In the order, which you can find posted at the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature any public comment tonight. This will be just the select board conducting final interviews. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening via Zoom, as posted as the town's website for identifying how you may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that people may see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please note that all supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available at the town's website and when final minutes are posted, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, will note otherwise. Before we get going with the first item of our agenda tonight, I'd like to just let everyone know that I will introduce each speaker. And after they conclude their remarks, we will go down a list of the members. But as of tonight, we have Mr. Bernie Lynch, who's going to help me quarterback interviews tonight. And I appreciate his effort in being here. Lastly, please, if you would like to have the floor, indicate to me so I can give you the time and the floor to make your comments. And if there are any votes taken tonight, they will be conducted by roll call vote. Before we get going, I do have a brief statement that I would like to read on behalf of the Select Board tonight. The Select Board denounces in the strongest possible terms with the violence and destruction that has taken place at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. today. A house divided against itself cannot stand. If voting is the lifeblood of democracy, then the peaceful transition to power is the beating heart of the republic. Without it, the principles upon which this nation are founded are destroyed. Free exchange of ideas is crucial to our democracy. The right to protest is embedded in our Constitution, but the destruction of the Capitol during transition of power is not free speech or mere protest, it is insurrection. We are a nation of laws, and attempts to impede the legal process through harassment, threats, and intimidation are not worthy of any American who calls him or herself a patriot. This board calls on all of us to reject the darker angels that call for violence and recommit to national unity. And tonight, may God bless us and save the U.S. Thank you. All right, so thank you for that brief statement. Mr. Lynch, good evening and welcome. So I'm going to hand this over to you before we get off to our 5:15 start.
Okay. Well, we can essentially we've sent the board members a listing. Well, we've sent a number of things to you the last week. Hopefully you found them to be helpful to you in understanding the candidates and the process that we've gone through. We've sent along, obviously, the cover letters and resumes of the 3 candidates that you'll be looking at tonight, that you'll be interviewing. We've included reference comments that we've received from people that know and work with each one of these candidates that hopefully will give you some sense of their style, their skills, the types of projects that people have worked with them on in their current or former positions. And we've also included for the board a list of potential questions that we would propose be used tonight. At our last meeting with the board, I believe the thought was that I would act as some type of facilitator. I'm happy to continue in that role or to act otherwise. But that is our process tonight. Each one of the candidates have been given a time to appear for roughly 1 hour. And hopefully we'll have some constructive and helpful dialogue during that process. Happy to take any questions people may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Does the board have any questions or any comments or anything that needs clarification before we begin? I think we're free to go, Mr. Lynch.
Okay, well, I think if we're free to go and if people are willing to do it, and Mr. Prasad is willing to do it, he's probably anxious to get it going. I'm happy to start just a little bit, start the process. And again, this is intended to be a dialogue. I'll throw topics and questions out there, but I expect that the board members will be coming at you from all sides, Evan, with their questions, their comments, try to drill down into the responses you give us. So if I could, let me start with one, thanking you for being here tonight and participating in this process. And I just thought it would be helpful to take a few minutes and just tell the board about yourself, and in particular, why are you interested in Grafton? What about it, makes you want to make a move, and why do you think you'd be successful in the town of Grafton?
Okay, sure. First, thank you all for allowing me to get this far in the process. It's very humbling. I did read the resumes of the other 2 candidates, and I feel very proud to be among that group. And thank you to Mr. Lynch and the search committee. That was a very positive experience for me as well. So I am a native of Munson. My family moved to Munson when I was 6 years old. I went through the school system here. I spent a lot of time working in, my family. My family is very entrepreneurial, so in their endeavors, I've done a lot of different things in my life until I decided to go back to school. Went to school originally to be a civil engineer until I realized that it has a lot of math in it, and that maybe that I didn't want to be doing that type of work every day. Picked up political science from there, fell in love with that, and then kind of ran with it from there. I chose to apply to Grafton really after reading the ad that Paradigm had put out, and I realized that you did that through your search committee as well as your public survey. I thought that was a great document. There was a lot of things in there that intrigued me. I would like to note this is the only position I've applied for since taking the job in Munson. This is only my second interview in 6 years that I'm on this side of the table for. And really, as I started to look at what you're working on in Grafton, it seemed to resonate with me, your economic development ideas, some of your plans that you have in place, in a way that only a municipal manager could feel. I watched one of your meetings in which you spent a fair amount of time discussing sidewalks and sidewalk planning, and that was super exciting to me. Maybe not to the general public, but the idea of focusing on connecting different parts of your walking district to schools or to shops or to where people need to get is a hugely important part of infrastructure. And just the fact that you as the board are leading those discussions, really resonated with me, and amongst other things that I saw as well. But it just Grafton seemed to resonate, and I decided to apply.
How big is the population of Munson is?
8,560.
Okay, so 8,560. You'd be moving to basically doubling the size. The community you'd be working for, and the organization would be, similarly scaled, be larger.
Yep.
What do you see as, the issues that you would have in transitioning to a new community, a new organization that would be larger?
So the idea of scaling up what I deal with on a daily basis is a little daunting, but not something that really worries me on a large scale. So let's start with the community first. Obviously, it would take me some time to learn the community and ingratiate myself. I would probably spend a fair amount of time actually just looking at things. So even though I grew up in Munson's 44 square miles, and there's a lot of places the town, even growing up here, I had never seen. And so when my daughter was born in 2014 and my wife went back to work on Saturdays, being the stellar father that I am, I couldn't get her to take a nap in the afternoon. So we spent 2 hours every Saturday driving the roads of Munson, and I actually was able to see a lot of things and get my mind around things that are happening in the community that we're not catching because, our organization was maybe not scaled properly or designed properly to catch these things. So, housing issues, road issues, things that I could affect change with. And I would suspect I would do a similar thing. My kids are 4 and 6 now, so I'm not going to take them on a 2-hour ride through Grafton. But I would spend some time, learning and seeing as much things as I can with my own eyes, and then interacting with people. I mean, that's the real big part. You get you'll have the same 100 people interact with you in local government. And then you'll have everyone else. And so sometimes finding the everyone else is the challenge, to really see the beating heart of the community. So it's all about, to me, it's about time and meeting people and having conversation and trying to feel my way through that. As far as the organization goes, again, not really concerned that it would grow. I mean, the principles are still the same. You just scale them differently. So I would employ some of the same strategies I did here to get my feet on the ground and, meet with department heads and meet with staff. Obviously, it's difficult in our current situation to do that. So it would take some kind of a different approach. But the idea is still the same, is to reach out to people. When I started here, I spent the 2 weeks before I actually started the job. I met with every department head and we talked about what's the low-hanging fruit, what does staff want to see, what are the things that have happened in the past that you felt were bad choices. Doesn't mean that we're going to change them. It's just what are they, what are those sore spots, and what are we missing. I think the biggest mistake you can make is go in and think that you know everything and what people need and what they're going to see. I spent a lot of time, the folks at the highway department showed me every piece of equipment that is there and everything that's wrong with it. And you have to have those meetings and those interactions and then follow through on some of that low hanging fruit and make changes and really drill down. So I'm not daunted by the scaling. I think we would approach it much the same way.
Okay. Right. That's interesting. You brought that up, when you were giving your introduction, we didn't get into a lot of detail. This was your first town administrative position in Munson. So when you talked about your first 2 weeks, it might be interesting for the board to hear how you get into this line of work.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate your prompting. I'll get a little here as we go. So, I was working at a nonprofit for people with developmental disabilities. We had group homes throughout the state and day rehabilitation centers. And I was doing quality improvement work there as well as human rights work, which was my passion and how I got into that field. And following the June 1st tornado of 2011, Munson lost its emergency management director, which in Munson is a stipend position. It's like $1,500 a year. Small stuff, doesn't have a lot of interaction. It's mostly planning. So I took that role on in August of 2011. And part of that was, the then town administrator had told me, we haven't opened an emergency operating center in 15 years prior to the tornado, and it's really kind of quiet. You're going to do a lot of planning and meet with the chiefs and stuff like that. So in the next year, we opened the emergency operating center 5 times. I spent 8 days sleeping on the floor of the police department when we had no power. And the town local government was happy with me at that point. I made some really good connections. The select board was very pleased. So when the town administrator decided to retire, she reached out and said, you should consider applying for this. And it wasn't really on my career trajectory, but the more I looked at it, the more I thought, well, that's kind of right up my alley. I'm a poli-sci nerd. I like history. I like government, and I like helping people. And so maybe I can blend all those things together. And that's pretty much what happened. I started, March 1st of 2014 with no experience. And that was quite a culture shock coming from the private sector where, I would say something would happen and I'd say, well, let's do this. And everyone would say, well, that's illegal. And you'd say, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And they say, well, pursuant to chapter 61A, you can't do that, or whatever the thing is. So there was a lot of learning there that there's already a framework in place. Sometimes that framework is counterintuitive, although I think the longer you do this, the more you see some of the value of it. And the value comes from making sure that everyone is represented fairly. But it was different. It was a whole different world.
You mentioned you kind of already answered one of, I guess, my question of what would your entry plan look like? You come in, you drive around the town, you get to see things, you talk to people. So that's your entry plan.
Yes.
What do you want to achieve in your first 6 months?
So I think, the critical thing in the first 6 months is working with department heads to, again, assess where everything is. Luckily, I guess from what I've seen just through your public documents, you're pretty much there. You seem like a stable, you've got a lot of stable practices in place, which is great. So, one of the things, and maybe I'll digress just a touch. So when I started here, the first thing we did as department heads, so I reached out to everybody. We had our one-on-one meetings. We also met with staff so that they would know who I was. I'm approachable. There's a chain of command, but we want to hear what these ideas are and everything that happens in the community. The other thing we did is we started our monthly department head meetings, and we read books together. We went through a series of different books, and we would do a chapter a month and come out and talk about what we liked about the chapter, what we didn't like, how it impacts our daily jobs. And so I would think that my entry would look similar to that with department heads, because while there were some people that didn't buy into it, we have a lot of fun with it, and we continue to do that to this day. The first 6 months is all about, staff are going to be concerned about change, and you've got to hear concerns, and you also have to calm people down and let them know that, this isn't, not all change is bad. And we're gonna work on things together, and we're gonna come through. It doesn't matter if people see it as a positive change or a negative change. Change is still difficult in an organization. And so, we would have to have, we do things that would try to kind of smooth some of those fears over. And also, we're heading into budget season, so I would immediately start trying to wrap my head around, where that process is, and meet the critical folks that I need to talk to get that going. And then, you'd be, someone like me coming in, I'd have to rely very heavily on the department heads to get through that first 6 months, and have them guide me on, and the board. I don't want to cut you folks out of it at all, but they're the boots on the ground on a daily basis, and I'd want to hear, how do we stabilize the first 6 months, and then where do we want to go, under your guidance.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah, thank you, Evan. I just want to drill down on that a little bit. When we were in our interviews with the selection commission, You had talked about when you came aboard where you are now, how you oversaw a culture change. Could you talk a little bit about, how that culture change worked? What were the challenges that you had to deal with? And I know you mentioned the book. If you could get into, I can't remember the title of the book, but I remember looking it up and I thought it was pretty impressive.
Sure. So when I arrived, and I don't want it to sound like Munson was some catastrophic, horrible place to be. It's much like any other organization. There were some battle wounds. Department heads didn't come to department head meetings. They wouldn't participate. If they did, they would sit there solemnly and then just leave. The organization had some pretty rough edges, and had been there had been a lot of warring between the departments. And that stems from a number of practices, whether that's the shotgun approach to budgeting, or the approach to how we treat other people, favoritism in the organization, all different kinds of things. And what was nice coming in from the outside is I didn't have any of that. I don't care that 10 years ago highway got an extra guy and you didn't, and now that's that's a problem. We can certainly talk about the problem, but it wasn't my problem. And so there's a great jumping off point there, because I have a blank slate, which is fantastic. One of the things that we did when we started looking at books, and I tried to select a book that would be, an easy read, not because I don't think people are intelligent, but because I didn't want it to be arduous. And I wanted to pick something that really struck, I think, to the heart of leadership. And so I chose a book called Leadership is an Art by Max De Pree. And so Max De Pree was the head of Herman Miller for a while. And he has a really interesting take on leadership that's different than a lot of other sources and things that you learn when you're going through college or whatever. And he really drills down on the fact that people are people. They're not just, the highway surveyor is not just a highway surveyor. He's a father, and maybe he plays the guitar, and maybe he plays golf, and whatever that is. And that these are important assets or facets to people's personalities, and that you have to look beyond just the fact that they come in here and they do X for you. You have to look at them as people and understand that they're human beings, and how do you interact on that level. And so one of the things we spent the most amount of time on is there's one chapter in the book called The Millwright Died. And it talks about the millwright for Herman Miller passes away, and the CEO goes to the house to express his condolences, and finds out that this man was a wonderful poet, and learns all this background stuff about the man that changes kind of his perspective on just, the guy comes in and does his millwright work and goes home. And so there was a shift there at Herman Miller. If you ever have any chance to read about the organizational structure of Herman Miller, I would recommend it. They have some really cool things, very innovative. And so, I got a core group of people into it. They were into the book. It was an easy read. The chapters were kind of short, and there's some things I think that you could take to heart. So we started there, and then we built on to another book. We've done Banishing Bureaucracy. I wanted to do this book called Execution, which I really enjoyed, but it spends a lot of time talking about laying people off, and I didn't want that to be like the opening message here. Like, there's some fundamental pieces to it on the public side that, yes, it makes sense. We're not going to do that on the municipal side, but so we did some of that stuff. There's the new public service type books. So we did a lot of that. And then I didn't mention this to the selection committee, but I thought about it after. There is a point in which you can't just do a chapter a month and have everybody read books. At a certain point, that people get bored. And so the other thing that we did is we joined, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a website called Masterclass. And so it's experts in their field that come out, they give a seminar basically. And so we had watched a short video from this guy, Mike Voss. And so he owns Black Swan Consulting. He's a former FBI negotiator. And so I got some real good feedback from the department heads when we watched this little clip on YouTube. So we joined Masterclass and we watched this whole series on negotiation. And what was pretty neat is that, so he gives out negotiation strategies in each different segment. And so what I did was I used those negotiation strategies on the staff for the month preceding the lesson. So whether that's how to draw people out in conversation or repetition, or one of the ways to spur, further dialogue as well. How do you expect me to do that? How can I do that? And so I would do that with them, and then they would see it on the show and they'd be like, I thought that was odd that you've never said that phrase to me. And now all of a sudden all month, that's all, and so people got a kick out of it, and they really, I think they enjoyed it. And so part of that lesson was we started to talk about how pretty much everything's a negotiation, whether it's the angry taxpayer, the person that you're trying to develop services for, or a staff member. It's all a negotiation of some way. You're trying to get someone the resolve that they're looking for. And we also tried to spend some time shifting the focus away from winning. Our job is not to win an argument with the taxpayer. Our job is to get resolve for the taxpayer to the best of our ability. Sometimes that won't happen because it can't, but winning is not the objective of local government.
Okay. Matt?
So, yeah, just a quick question. I find this line of conversation interesting. I'm in an organization, very large organization, and every 2 to 3 years we go through fairly dramatic reorganization. And we're in the midst of one right now. I'm wondering how you deal with, in the midst of that type of cultural transformation, bringing department heads together, trying to get them to work in slightly different ways, challenging them to think about, their work in different ways. How do you deal with, those people on the margin that just aren't on board with it? Been there, done that. Like been here 25 years. I've been through 6 town administrators. What's this guy bringing to the table that I haven't seen before? So just another thing that I need to get through and not buying in. So
yeah.
What do you do with that crowd?
So what I did here in Munson is 2 things. One, I early on I noticed, and we're a fairly small organization, so I noticed that there was 5, 6 people that were on board right away. They were into it. They were hungry for some change, and they liked the fact that we're learning together and having different level of dialogue than just, the normal day-to-day routine. And there were definitely some people that did not get on board. And so 2 things happen. Either they find it so uncomfortable that they're sitting with their peers and haven't done any of the work and don't have any input and want to just be, no, I've done it for 25 years, I'm not changing. So there's a little bit of peer pressure that you use to your advantage. But, we also have seen some of those folks choose to move on. And so part of that change is understanding that that's okay. Nothing's catastrophic. None of us are the only one that could possibly do this job. And, if you no longer align with our culture, then maybe it is time to either find a different culture or move on to something else. I really didn't have a ton of that. There's department heads that I'm sure have never cracked the book and just fake it. You can kind of see that, and it depends on how hard you want to push it. Some people will take more out of it than others, and some will skate by. But if you change if you get enough people on board, the culture of the organization changes regardless of what those other people are doing. In my opinion, and that's pretty much what happened here.
Thanks.
All right. I think we've covered a good part of your leadership and management style through that discussion. So that was great. Let's get into financial management. Talk to us about your experience in managing finances and how you do that. And in particular, one of your references referred to the fact that you're always looking for new creative ideas and solutions for the town in terms of generating new revenue sources and decreasing costs. So when you're talking about your financial management strategies, I'm curious about that with what your philosophy is. I'm also curious about hearing about these creative ways of increasing revenues and decreasing costs.
Okay, thank you. I'll have to find out who that reference is for putting me on the spot like that.
I just want to steal some ideas. So.
Yeah. My financial experience is solely the town of Munson. So I have some private sector stuff, you know, when I worked for my family's landscaping supply company and I did payroll and books and all of that stuff. It really does not compare to what we do here. So, you know, my general financial management style is leaning on the people that have the most expertise in your organization, your finance directors, your accountants. You know, you really have to listen to those folks. Those people have their finger on the pulse. And so really the budget process in Munson has become a very collaborative experience. It's not really top down. And so what we do is we work together to figure out a way to create a budget that both satisfies the needs of the community in the most fiscally responsible way possible. And so one of the things that we did is we got rid of the shotgun approach to financial management. When I say that, what I mean is how it used to work is every department head went to the finance committee and they threw out their budget, and their budget could have all kinds. There was no intermediary review process. So it was only what happened at those meetings that people learned what was of value to the department. And so what I did when I came here is said, okay, we're gonna stop that. We're going to get together as a group and we're gonna hash this budget out before we do that, before we go present it to anyone else. We're gonna come up with what we think our stage one budget is. And so we did that by looking at things like, and I use this example quite frequently. You know, if the police are buying a new cruiser and it's $33,000 and we don't, you know, that's all we have is $33,000. And Park and Rec needs wood chips for one of the playgrounds because they've deteriorated and the kids are going to hurt their ankles. Those are both valid needs that need to be addressed. So let's come up with strategies to say, okay, we're buying the same Dodge Charger. The body style is the same as it's been since 2014. We can take our light bars and radios out of this car. We don't need to buy new ones. We can put them on the old one. That saves us $3,000. Now Park and Rec can get their wood chips. And when you put the people in the room together, when they have to look at each other and they have to talk through their issues, you start getting some really good collaboration there. And that's really what we've done since 2014. And it's worked out fabulously. So that when we then go in front of the public and we go to the finance committee and we go to the board of selectmen, we have a fairly unified front. It doesn't mean that people don't have their inputs and other things change, the finance committee and the board of selectmen. But we're not having these you know, dialogues in public that make it seem like you know, the police are trying to steal all the money, or there's just no reason for that. So that's what we've done. As a probably quasi wrong approach to my financial management, when I started in Munson, we had a tax rate of 1612. Today it's 1834. So understandably, that seems like moving in the wrong direction. Although I can tell you that when I started at 1612, everything was broken. We had no capital plan. We couldn't properly finance services. Our buildings were not maintained. You know, we had all these problems. And the whole point is to me, is to find a balance between providing the level of service that the public demands in the most efficient way possible. But, you know, you have to find the balance. There's a balance there. And so, you know, if you run a municipality in the cheapest way possible, you run everything into the ground and then things start to have no value. And if they have no value, then it drags down everything else in the community. I really believe that. That's why you know, our town hall on Main Street here, I think, is one of the most beautiful properties on Main Street. And there's a reason for that. We take pride in it, but it's the anchor to downtown. And so if your anchor looks like you've abandoned it, or let me ask you, anchor's probably bad. Let's say the ship. If the ship looks like you abandoned it, you know, it's just going to drag everything else down. So we have to find a balance. And so we've hit that equilibrium because our tax rate's actually going down this year by like 14 cents. But so I try to be really pragmatic in looking at the needs versus you know, cost. We spent a lot of time on our capital plan. We have really the first capital plan that Munson's ever had that's really data driven. And so we implemented that, and that has been a huge success. In fact, so some of the staff here found out that I had interviewed for another position, and one of the guys at Highway said, "But how are we going to get our equipment?" And I assured him that it's not me that got the equipment, it's the capital plan. And it's actually having a data-driven approach that you can bring to the public and say, here's what we're trying to achieve. This is where we have to get to at the end. Instead of just throwing darts at, I want this and I want that. So we were able to bring that on. We've increased our bond rating. We have another bond call on Friday that I'm hopeful will result in another increase, because we've just put in place an 80-page financial policy, which is also brand new to the town of Munson. And so that's my basic background and history in it. I've done similar things to, I think, what's happening in Grafton, although on a slightly smaller scale, I would say. Yes, sir.
Lynch, I got a question. I want to follow up on that one. You talk about your fiscal management and your approach and your style, and I know this gets into a little bit later about, your relationship style with other boards and committees, but can you talk real quick about, what experience or how would you handle, I guess, if you had select board, finance committee, or school committee, or some other, board or committee in Grafton want to have involvement or some extent of representation into that budget process, and I guess the follow-up to that is how would you tie that back to the departments? Like, how would you create that relationship?
So one of the things that I attempted to do here and didn't have great success, but I think it's a valid thing, is creating quasi liaisons between department heads or departments and members of either the board or finance committee that want to be looped into this process. One of the things that I noticed straight away is, the first year we were having an argument over whether we should buy 2 buses or 1 bus. No, 2 buses or 1 bus. And so one of the first things I did was take a ride and go look at all the buses. I met the mechanic, he showed me around, and I looked at all the buses. And then when I went to the finance committee and they were arguing over whether to buy 2 buses or 1 bus, part of the big disconnect was, you've never seen the buses. How do you wrap your head around that? No, the department head didn't present anything. There was no documentation, there's no pictures, and nor did anyone take a ride to just stop in and say, hey, let me see the bus. It'd take you 5 minutes. So, I think that creating some kind of liaison between departments and boards is important. I also think that it's important to give deference to the boards that are volunteer, that these are folks that are from the community, that are giving their time up. And, if they want a seat at the table, then they get a seat at the table. And it doesn't, I think, change the process all that much as far as what we're going to do as the bureaucrats of the bunch. We're still going to carry on the budget, but we're going to have different inputs. And I don't think any of those inputs are going to be bad. I can tell you one of the things that I'm most proud of is our relationship between the town and the schools. And we did that by incorporating each other into each other's processes. So, I'm on the group that's negotiating teacher salaries, with the union. And in Munson, her name's Dr. Clark. She comes in and helps me interview for the town accountant position. And so we've got a lot of that cross pollination, I guess, and I think it's worked out very well. One of the sayings that you learn from one of the books that I had the folks read here is that having a say is different than having a vote. And, we as the bureaucrat side of the house need to understand that we're guiding the process and we're putting forward a document. But at the end of the day, it's the elected officials and the town meeting body that have the authority in that process. And I think that's important to always note, so that you're not cutting people out of the process that want to be involved.
All right, thank you.
When you're working with the boards and working with the departments, and you spoke to this already in the capital planning aspect, that it's data driven and it's looking out, so what equipment's coming online. What about the rest of your budget in terms of forward thinking and utilizing forecasts? Is that something that you've utilized?
Yeah, so we, and thank you. I just realized I did not really close the loop on one of your prior questions talking about technology and innovation. So I'll combine those two conversations, I think, because I think they dovetail nicely. So we're doing what a lot of municipalities do here in Massachusetts. And so, we rely on our spreadsheets and our Excel sheets that have been the same for 10 years. And, we plug in our revenue and all the rest of it. 2 years ago, we decided to make a switch, and we partnered with a company called ClearGov. And we did that for two reasons. So ClearGov is a fiscal transparency website. And so every expenditure by the line item is available going back to 2005, I believe, for the town of Munson. So you want to see what your tax dollar did in 2006 and where it went, you can see that. And that was a real driver there. But the other side of it, the back end side, is that it's also a budgeting website. And so now all of our department heads plug in their budgets to this ClearGov system. And one of the beautiful pieces of it is when you click on, like, say, your department head, your department budget, it shows basically that not only the data that happened previous, but also the forecast of what they think may be available based on the trajectory of our budget. So we're able to forecast out 5 years, 10 years by utilizing this software. And the feature that I really like is that if you, the board, said, look, we're going to hold all growth to 1%, it's a pandemic, we don't have the money, we can put right into that software that department heads only have 1% to play with, and so you can limit it, and so that you don't start getting these other things outside of there. The other piece that we did that I really found helpful is we created we call it a level services budget, and then we have the above level services budget. And so the above level services budget incorporates two things, both the future needs, where you think your department's going to be, but also the wish list. And so, this is, I'm the park and rec director, and I've really wanted for 10 years to build a disc golf course. So we put that in the wish list category, and then we see where the budget comes out, because, we're not in the business of fulfilling everyone's wishes. But if there's a public good that can be gained from some of those, we also don't want to just leave them to the side forever either. We want to make sure we capture them. So we've done some of that around technology and innovation. We brought on Code Red for notification, which I think you folks are using as well. I had a brief stint for 3 years with an app called SeeClickFix. And so that's kind of cool. I thought so. The general public didn't agree because I couldn't get folks to use it. I still think it was a really cool idea. But basically you go around with your cell phone. If there's a pothole, you can take a picture of it. It geotags that pothole and sends it to Highway and says, here's a pothole you should fix. I thought that was brilliant. I really thought that would take off. It did not. And eventually we parted ways on that. But, the other things that we've done are, innovative for Munson and maybe not innovative outside of Munson, but just changing the way that we approach our IT in-house. So before the pandemic hit, probably 80% of our folks were ready to go with remote participation already. Having gone through the tornado, we recognize that if a tornado hits your building, it's great to be able to take that laptop, go to the library, and still be able to make payroll. So we were already 80% of the way there. So we've done a lot through that. Police and fire have had technological advances. We have a new highway surveyor that just started, and I see some technological advances that we're going to be able to make there, asphalt management planning, things like that weren't possible before. But it's really just, I try to spend as much time listening to people, thinking about what other towns are doing, and then also, implementing things when we think we can make change.
That's interesting. One of our questions that was going to be coming up was, I remember when we were talking to the board about the type of person that they would like to see in the role of town administrator. One of the comments made by one of the board members was, want someone that stays on top of best practices and innovations. How do you gather that information? What formal and informal means do you use?
So I get a lot through like my listservs that I'm part of. Other towns are talking about things. I'm never afraid to just, I hear Arlington's got a great virtual budget. So I'll call them and say, how'd you do that? Right. I mean, those are the type of things that I think are really helpful. And, you know, the other ways is I spend a lot of time doing things that have nothing to do with government that I find I can carry over. I pride myself that I have a pretty broad experience in life. And so, you know, I try to see other things and bring them along. So if I'm watching a documentary or reading a book or, you know, I've gotten what I did a couple things that were straight out of my kids' YouTube channels that were definitely geared towards children, but I thought would be fantastic to try to get people back to basics here. It's all, to me, it's just being, I try to be as regular of a guy as I can and listen to people. And when I see somebody doing something that's better than I'm doing it, I don't have a problem saying, wow, that's better. How did you do it? Teach me how to do it. You know, you go to the MMA annual meeting, and I'm like the worst person to take there because I want everything. I find everything fascinating, and we can do everything that they're doing. You know, everything is so cool. And so I really just try to keep my eyes open and find ways that I can take innovation from other sectors and other towns and bring them to wherever I am. And so, you know, I think people here have liked that. And we've been able to really do some cool stuff. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished here in the last 6 years.
Are you a member of the ICMA?
I am,
Okay.
and I am on the cusp of being a credentialed manager candidate, because I have to, my
Right.
master's counts for some, but I have to have been there for 7 years and I'm at
Right.
6. So, but I'm working on it.
Good.
So
All right.
that was not something that was really driven here. But it's definitely something that I can see some tremendous benefit from. You know, I still keep in touch with people I went to college with that are doing stuff all over the country. I still follow up on the American Political Science Association stuff. You know, I try to just capture take in as much in it as I can and put it to as best use as we can here.
Okay, good. Well, Ed,
Sorry, Bernie, I just want to hop onto a slightly different topic, although still within the realm of budget management, if I could.
Sure.
Okay. So when you come aboard here, you're going to come into, you know, if we hire you into a town where you've just passed a second override in about 7 years. There is levy capacity, although, you know, the expectation is we're going to run out of it in, I think, 4 years or so. Every year, you're going to get somewhere in the realm of $2 million in new money. Of course, you know, there's the school budget, which the school's in charge of, and then there's the municipal budget, which you're going to come up with. How do you go about balancing? I think I asked you this before, but just for the benefit of everyone watching now, you know, how do you go about balancing where that new money comes in? A lot of people have talked about fixed percentages. Some people have talked about zero-based budgeting. You know, how would you go about doing that?
So I like zero-based budgeting. I think that it's got its merits for sure. But I also, you know, so much of this job I have found is less about those numbers and more about the people. And so one of the things that never and that I'm aware of happened here that happens now is, you know, you have this grand fight over the budget between the school and the town. And so what we've been able to change here is, you know, the superintendent and I are in constant contact during the budget review process, and we talk about the needs of the community. And so we've developed a relationship where, you know, if we need the police cruiser, they understand that and they will help us get to that goal. And so that's been really, really positive. So, you know, part of the challenge that we have in 2020 is shrinking municipal budgets and, you know, this levy capacity problem that a lot of communities have and the constant drive for an override. And so part of that also, I think, comes from finding alternative sources of revenue, right? Non-tax revenue. So your HCAs, I know that you folks were talking about HCAs. That's been a real boom here in Munson. We've done some solar agreements, although the community's not as keen on solar as it once was. Looking at other ways to bring revenue. And then also, one of the things we really focused on here is, okay, so we got our zero-based budget, or we're gonna do a level services budget, or whatever FinCom kind of wants us to do. But we spend a lot of time looking at efficiencies and return on investment. And so, one of the things we just did this for the schools. We bought a piece of equipment. It's called a Ventrac. If you don't know what it is, just Google it. They're tremendous fun. And so it's got all these attachments. It does all these things. Well, we were paying a landscaper and $23,000 a year, and a plow company $30,000 a year. And we were in the midst of transitioning to having a school and town shared facilities department. And so what we did is we took that Ventrac cost us, $45,000 with all its accoutrement. And so you take that and your staff and all the rest of it, and you put it together, and you find out, well, heck, this has got a 2.5-year return on investment. And everything after that just saves us capacity, right? That's money we don't have to spend, because that number is going to go up over the next 5 years. That 30,000 is going to become 31, 32, 35, whatever it is. So we've been able to look at some of those things and find innovation there as well, with whether that's by using equipment to do the job properly, or also looking at ways in which we can be more efficient and effective and decrease what we have to do. I'm not sure the awareness level of what's called an ESCO. So that's an energy services contract. And essentially we're doing one of these right now in Munson, and I find it to be very, very cool. So the school department, through years of, in my opinion, under budgeting on the maintenance side, they've got some tremendous maintenance issues. Okay. We've got a thing called a Dectron. If I never have to hear the word Dectron again, I would be a happy man. So the Dectron controls the HVAC of the pool. And it is a horrific thing. It's tied to a computer, and the computer is a Gateway purchased in 1991. There's no upgrading this system. It's been a nightmare. There have been days when I have been in the Dectron unit with the maintenance guy so that we can pull open dampers to get the humidity down below 90% in that pool. And that's my lunch break. So we need to figure out ways to do that. Well, that's a $500,000 piece of equipment. And so what we decided to do is fund this thing called an ESCO. And so we partnered with Siemens Energy. They come in and they put in energy reduction technologies, whether that's lighting, HVAC stuff, boilers, whatever it is. And essentially what happens is the town of Munson will now continue to pay the energy bill that it was paying, or thereabouts, pretty close. But we get all the new stuff. The savings in that energy plan goes to fund the note that we carry with Siemens. So let's say we save $100,000 a year in energy. That's what we designed the project, so that we're paying $100,000 a year loan to Siemens. But in the meantime, we've now funded a $500,000 Dectron unit that we would never, I can't go to the taxpayers in the middle of a pandemic and say, we want to save the pool for the swim team, give us a $500,000. That's hard to do. So we've looked at ways to free up budget without having to add to that back end, if that makes sense. And we're going to continue, I would do that if I was in Grafton. If I stay in Munson, I would continue to do it here. That I think is maybe talks to the heart of what they were talking about with strategies and innovation.
One of the other ways that communities solve their financial issues is economic development. What's been your experience with economic development in Munson, and what ideas do you have for Grafton, how you would go about bringing new businesses in?
Okay, so Munson's a little bit of a different animal than Grafton. So out here in the western part of the state, our property values are lower. Redevelopment tends to be difficult. We find ourselves more and more of the bedroom community as the mom and pop shops fade. And so we've really had to look at alternative ways to try to help these things. So one of the ways we did is to partner with a cannabis grower and we actually executed 2 HCAs with that same company. We have no sales here. We have just the grow. We get 2.5% of revenue on the medical side and 3% on the rec side. But so to me, I mean, not even to me. anybody should see this as great economic development. So we had an old plastics molding company that had been closed for about 8 years, 53,000 square foot building, vacant. They were paying the taxes on it, and taxes were about $17,000 a year. So that shows you where we are in Munson. So we now have partnered with Holistic Industries. They have around 100 employees. They pay the town a minimum of $250,000 a year in income, plus the $17,000 in property tax. And we now have a viable business again in what was a vacant property. And so we've tried to look at strategies of how to do that throughout our downtown, because we do have some shuttered businesses in the downtown area. That remains a challenge. One of the things that we are looking at in the future is a downtown redevelopment plan to try to make Munson more of a friendly place to get out of your car and walk around and do some shopping and maybe see some other amenities and do those types of things. We have a really big presence here for hikers and naturalists that come here. And so we've also spent some time trying to figure out how to grab those people and get them to spend some money before they go back to wherever they came here from. And so, when if I were selected for Grafton, I would, continue the same stuff. I did watch some of your select board meetings where you talked about some problems with the HCAs. So I think the first order of business would be to reach out to those people that are holding the HCAs and see where we're at and what can be done to move it along. A lot of the success we had with our HCA came down to relationship, building relationship with the owner, trying to form a collaboration that's good for both Munson and for them to thrive as a business. But I can tell you that after watching some of your select board meetings, if our deal with Holistic didn't move forward, I think we would find ourselves in the same predicament that you're in. I think that is a fundamental issue with the scramble that came when cannabis first became legalized and we were going to start seeing these facilities pop up. I don't think that, we've properly foreshadowed throughout the Commonwealth what that was going to look like and what would happen when you reached capacity, or what happens when the bubble bursts, or what happens when you have an agreement with somebody that decides they're not going to do it and you're now stuck with that agreement. So I don't think in listening to you folks talk, I don't think we would find ourselves in a much different predicament. We just happen to have a company that came through. But I think pushing on some of those things, and also working with, you gotta reach out to your local landowners and see, if they've got vacant property and they've been sitting on it for a long time. Talk to them about why is that? Is it us? And if it's us, what do we do to change? And how do we help that? Sometimes you can't do anything. The owner wants too much money or they want too much rent, and we can't fix that. We're the government. That's not our job. But we can look at strategies that will help ease some of that. And so one of the things we talked about here was, building permits. So do we come up with a strategy that says, look, if you're a business and you want to come here and you've got, you're going to build a facility with 50 or more people, you will not pay. Here's your building permit, no fees. You just come in. It's a strategy they employed in Detroit to marginal success because Detroit's got other problems. But why can't we do stuff like that? Why can't we look at strategies like that? A little off topic for economic development, but I Munson's a smaller place, so I spent 2 hours last Friday walking through the woods on a person's property that we dump municipal water on from a country drainage ditch. And so previous to our new highway surveyor, that person was told, look, water predates you. You should have seen that when you bought the house or bought the property, not our problem. So now you've got a vacant lot that's wet, and the homeowner, the property owner is threatening to sue you, and I can't really blame them. I get it. So we spent some time reviewing the law around stormwater in this particular case, and turns out that the town of Munson owns the property right behind this parcel. So we came up with a plan to pipe water from the road back. The property owner is going to give us an easement. Their property becomes dry. They can build a house. We get the tax money, right? I mean, it's a good strategy. So again, it comes back to return on investment, because for probably 7 years of trying to go through the town, we've been telling him, no, that water's your problem. Where we can spend $3,000, pipe the water onto town property that doesn't impact this person's residence, And in a year and a half, we've made our money back with now a viable lot with a house on it. That makes, that's perfect sense. And there's ways to scale that up, I think, and look at what's happening in the community and what's holding back businesses or business owners or property owners, and what can we do as a local government to be more progressive or help.
Shifting gears over to, we have about 15 minutes left, shifting gears over to some other aspects of the town administrator position. Talk to us about your collective bargaining experience. You have unions.
I just had negotiations today.
How'd it go?
Oh, it's great.
Okay, good.
Not even sarcastically. It was actually great. So we have in the last 6 years developed very good relationships with our unions. I think we've created some very fair bargains, and I think that they have seen that we've gone to bat for them when we think that what they're asking for is valid, or what we think that they're missing. And we will, I've advocated for our employees, I think, just as much as the union has. And so, you know, so just from today, this was our second meeting. It was our second proposal meeting. We've already TA'd 85% of what we need to talk about. And that's a couple things. One, over the last 6 years, we've hammered out 3 contracts, and I think everybody feels that we're in a good place. But we also, I think, listen well and are fair to the employees. It's interesting. I negotiate. We have 2 unions. We have one. Well, we have technically 3 because the school department has unions as well. But what I'm primarily focused on is the AFSCME union, which is our administrative staff and our highway DPW people, and then our IBPO, which is our police union here. They're totally different animals, and you have to have 2 totally different approaches to dealing with both of them. I found that over the years, educating people in those meetings is extremely helpful. When we talk about, okay, you want a 5% raise, what does that cost? Of course, nobody knows. So then we do the math, and then we say, how do we find that money? How do we justify that money? And you know, we come down. Every single agreement in Munson in the past 6 years has been a cost of living adjustment of 2, 2, and 2. Every single one. And we've done that because we've shown people the value of looking at the consumer price index and inflation and CBIST and saying, we can't give you a 4% cost of living adjustment when, you know, inflation's 1.8%. That's not what a cost of living adjustment is. We've been able to make some strategy there. But also, you know, we just have it kind of easy. And it wasn't always that way. So when I started week 1, my 3rd day, we had mediation with the union. We were hung up on 25 cents an hour. And my marching orders for the select board was to crush them. And we were not giving up another cent. And so I met with the folks in mediation, and I said, look, I got to go back to the select board. So, you know, I went back to the select board and I said, look, folks, I'm the new guy. If you want me to have any political capital, I can't try to crush people over a quarter. It was literally $1,000 a year for the town. We're not talking big dollars here. And it all came back to some dispute that had happened in the last negotiation. That, again, has nothing to do with me. We have a clean slate. And then, you know, one of the other things I really like to employ is, so I went to Harvard's program on negotiation. It's a 3-day course. You go stay in Boston. If anybody ever has the opportunity to do it, it's fantastic. You negotiate with people from all over the world. I was negotiating with people from Argentina, oil executives. It was a lot of fun. We learned a lot. But part of what they teach you there is a strategy called grow the pie, right? And so the idea there is that for you to win doesn't mean the other people have to lose. You don't have to take everything from them, because if you are negotiating with your staff and try to take everything from them, they're going to stay, but they're going to stay and work hard enough just not to get fired. They're not going to do anything for you. They're not going to step up to the plate when you need them to step up to the plate. And so it's developing a relationship in which they trust that you understand what they're going through, and they understand what you're going through, and that you need to find some kind of equitable middle ground. that grows the pie for both people. You get good strategies, or you get good services for the public, and they get a good living wage or whatever it is that they want. The other thing that never ceases to amaze me is that the people at the table negotiate on their own behalf. And that's been my personal sticking point. So any problems that I've had with the union have stemmed from that. I'm very much in line that the union represents the body of the union and not the people that sit only at the table. And so just today, I said, somebody had a proposal. I said, I'd be happy to entertain that proposal, but you have to go back to your membership and see if they actually want that. I'm not, we're not going to agree to something without you having conferred to those people, because those people actually stop by my office and say, why would you agree to that? So, we've got a really good culture that I think has helped those negotiations become a lot less divisive and stressful. So yeah, it goes pretty well. I think it's all about forming that collaborative approach.
We have some other questions here that I think we've already hit on. We've talked about project management. We've talked about your best practices and your open or clear gov budgeting certainly as a means of transparency. If board members want to talk more about that and communications, but I guess the big question that always has to be put in there is the group that you're going to be working the closest with are these people that you're on the Zoom call with. What does that relationship look like? How do you work with the Board of Selectmen, and how do you the select board, and how do you make sure that there's adequate communication?
So my strategy has been generally in Munson, so it's 3-member board, and the chair pretty much dictates what level of communication they want. And I just do that. They want it, that's what I do. So that goes from, I have one board member that wants to meet every Monday at 1. So that's the time they have available in their lunch break, and they want to come and just have me fill them in anecdotally on what's going on. I have other members that have asked me to every Friday send out just a list of stuff that they should know so that they're not caught unaware later. I've done that. It's really tailored to what the board wants. So at the end of the day, the board is elected. I work at the pleasure of the board, and I do what you ask me to do. Now, if it's burdensome or potentially unreasonable, I'm going to tell you that. But again, I really do believe in the philosophy of having a say is different than having a vote. I am not a voting member of the board. I'm going to, give the board my counsel and give them advice, and maybe they follow it and maybe they don't. Maybe they want me to do something that, as long as it's not illegal, I'm going to do it. But if I think there's a problem with it, I'm not a yes man. You will hear that from me, that I think that this is problematic, and I'm going to tell you why. It doesn't have, what did my woodshop teacher used to say? We can disagree without being disagreeable. I very much try to live my life that way. And so I feel my job is to tell you my opinion. I should have my pulse on the finger of what's happening in the organization and in the community. But I don't have a vote. And so if you take a different tact, that's fine. If you want different communication, that's fine too. That's pretty much it, really. I mean, that's what I see the role of a town administrator as. And over the course of the years, my board has changed, and sometimes they want me to be the guy that's in front of the community all the time. And as long as it's quiet, they're happy. And I have other people that have an agenda that they want to see through, and that's okay too. And we'll figure that out as well. But it sounds really simple, but I just talk to people. So, if you want to come sit in my office, one day a week for an hour and we chat, we can do that. If you want, I just want to report out every Friday, just send the whole board an email on what's going on in town. I can do that too. It really, and then currently I send out communications probably 2-3 times a week when something comes up that I think is going to reach the board in some way. So whether that's, I had an angry resident in here that thought the collector was rude to them and they're going to go to the Board of Selectmen. Even if I've handled the situation, I usually give a heads up and say, person said they were going to call the board. I think I satisfied their concerns. They seem to leave happy, but in case someone catches you, shoots you an email, you're aware of it. You know, I try to do that as much as possible. In a town of 8,000 people, that's not always 100% possible. I don't always know what people are going to bring to you as individual. And I realize Grafton's a lot larger. I'm using Munson as an example, but you know, I don't know what people are going to bring to you. And so the biggest challenge communication wise, both ways, I think, is that the board has to become comfortable enough with you to understand that when someone brings them a complaint, it needs to be addressed, it needs to be looked at, it needs to be handled. But we can't always assume that the town employees were 100% wrong. We can't just go to them with that. We have to have a dialogue. We have to see what happens. We have to explore, and then we have to figure out how to make sure that that never happens again if it's a problem. But I've also found the board, if I tell them ahead of time that, you know, hey, this is something we ran into and you might hear about it, we get to the resolve so much faster. You know, and whether and I'll tell you up front too, you know, I've had times when my interaction with a resident did not go well. You know, despite my best efforts, there was everything that came out of my mouth made everything worse. You know, and I think I can, you know, win people over, but it just, you know, never ceases to amaze me how badly it can go, how quickly. And so I'll send you all an email and say, so this did not go well. And here's what I'm going to try to do to resolve that. Or I don't think it should be me that tries to resolve it because the person clearly has a thing. They don't like me as a person, or I said something at some meeting and they took offense to it, whatever it was. You know, it's all people management. No one tells you when you take this job how much social work you actually do, and how many conversations you have with people that have, you know, have either legitimate or gripes or just want to be heard, and how much you have to, you know, figure that out quickly and listen to people and empathize and, you know, just be a nice human being and listen to them and try to help.
Board questions that I haven't hit up on yet or you're interested in? Anything? Nope. All right. Want to close us out at all, Evan, or anything you want to say as we get ready to end? Or any questions
Sure.
you have?
So again, you know, thank you for allowing me to progress through this process. You know, I'm very thankful to be sitting here and talking to you folks. I've seen what you're doing in Grafton, and I think there's some really excellent things that I could sink my teeth into and really get on board with. That said, I've looked at the other candidates, and I don't think you can make a bad choice tonight if you vote tonight or in the future. You know, we should have some really great candidates. Actually, you're next up, Josh Garcia and I have known each other for 6 years through circles out here. We talked on Wednesday, and we both agree that either one of us is the best choice. So no, but Josh is a great guy, and I have utmost respect for him. So, you know, I think you're going to do what's best for Grafton. If it's me, that's wonderful. If it's not, I really do appreciate the time and the conversation. It's been very nice.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
All right. One closeout question. Do I jump off the Zoom now? Is that the proper etiquette? I've never done a.
That is the proper etiquette. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all. It's been a pleasure to meet you and nice talking with you.
Great.
Thanks,
Coming
Evan.
up.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. You guys ready to go? Jump right in?
Yeah, Bernie, just real quick, I know we started a little bit earlier with Evan, so if you want to extend the same courtesy to Joshua, I think that's fair as
Yeah.
well.
And what I'll do is we'll get a hold of our third candidate and tell them to come on a little bit later. How's that sound?
I think that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, good. Josh, if you're there, you can unveil yourself. Very good.
Hello, everybody.
All right. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself and the board and we'll go from there?
Good evening, Josh Garcia. My name is Peter Carlson, the chair of the Grafton Select Board. I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight and your consideration for the position. I want to just go around the room. I know we did a brief introduction with the first candidate, but if our members would like to introduce themselves one at a time, just speak up. Mr. Alton, Mr. Frisbee, Mr. Williams.
One at a time. Hey Josh, I'm Colleen. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Josh. We met at the search committee meeting as well, but good to see you.
Josh, nice to meet you. Thanks a lot for coming out tonight. Matt Often.
Great. Well, we'll get right into it, Josh. We're gonna we'll give you a chance. We'll let you warm up by doing what many people don't like to do. Talk about yourself. So tell us about yourself. You know, the board obviously has seen your resume. They've read what people say about you in their reference report. But tell us about a little bit about your background, what got you into this business, and why you're interested in Grafton.
All right, so hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight and as a finalist, one of 3 candidates here. So a little bit about myself. I can say that after completing my master's degree from Westfield State University, I was drafted by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which is a regional planning organization out here in the Hampshire County region. I believe over there it's the CMRPC. And that's really where my sense of purpose evolved, where I decided my future will be in town administration. It was the work that we achieved there that introduced me to the profession, and many of the skills that I have been able to develop, many of the relationships I've been able to build. When I landed an opportunity at Blandford, coupled with my experiences serving on different municipal boards in my hometown, that's really where my practical hands-on experience developed in management, executing best practices in town administration. Many of the projects we've been able to work on at PVPC and those that we've been able to accomplish within the town of Blandford, you know, my experiences working in local government, I'm sure many of you can attest to this. It's very complex, and I feel that I thrive well in that environment, and that's where I continue to stay focused on continuing to grow in this profession, in the hopes to continue to do what I can in my little corner of the world to make a world a better place for everybody.
Okay, great. All right. We'll probably get into a little bit about what you've experienced out in Blandford as we get through the different aspects of the questions here. But you know, Blandford's you know, we talked about this during the screening committee process, and it's a question that we're putting to our candidates tonight. In one form or another. Blandford's a small town, small organization. How do you see yourself transitioning from that small town, that smaller organization, to the town of Grafton, which obviously would be larger?
So yes, you're absolutely right, and I go into this process completely acknowledging that and recognizing that. I can tell you, you know, comparatively to Grafton, sure, we have 8 full-timers, including myself, a handful of part-timers, and about 30 volunteers. But comparatively, like I said, you know, it's smaller. I recognize that. But in this transition, I can say I manage the town's contractual and service obligations as an employer. You know, I've dealt with conflict resolutions, drafted and enforced personnel policies, conducted performance evaluations, navigated systems and practices for hiring and even disciplining, dealing with complaints and other grievances as outlined in either the personnel policies or union contracts. Yes, it's a small town, but it has the same statutory responsibilities as larger communities like Grafton. And there's a basic way of how municipal government operates to navigate challenges. And it's just being able to you know, understand what the issues are, come up with solutions that work and implement them. So when you ask about the transition, you know, absolutely, it's bigger, but in this small town, you know, like I've described before, and coupled with that, I've done everything. I've been involved in, because of the limited capacity in Blandford. For those departments that have department heads, great. I've collaborated with them and provided necessary guidance as they did with me so that we can work together to meet their needs and providing services. And for those departments that were just volunteer boards that didn't have any staff capacity, stepping into that role, be it the Conservation Commission or the Planning Board, for example, and making sure that they're successful in what it is they do, their statutory responsibilities on behalf of the residents in the town. So I think that gives me a kind of a unique and competitive opportunity here when stepping into a role such as Grafton, because I'm sure that at Grafton you have full-time department heads that are doing the job. And because of the knowledge and skill I've been able to gain during my time in a community like Blandford, I think that, it'll allow me to be as hands-on collaboratively with the department heads to help departments grow and maintain services for the community.
Great. Okay, good. What about, what's your entry plan look like? In Blandford, you had the situation, I'll tell a little bit of the story. You worked for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which was helping the town of Blandford find a town administrator, and it fell through, and suddenly they were in a crisis, and you were sort of thrown into the midst initially, and then you made the decision to stay on. So you already knew what was going on in Blandford. What's the entry plan look like for you in Grafton? You come to Grafton 30 days from now. What do you do?
So really, I think, understanding if it's 30 days from now, understanding where we are in our fiscal year and annual town meeting is in May. I think, my immediate priority, although there's many priorities really, but understanding that we're in that position, I think first and foremost, I want to be able to kind of pick up the pieces where things stand currently to try to get you to get the town to accomplish what it needs to in preparation for town meeting. I think that's number one. If we're talking 30 days, but from now, but also in conjunction with that, being able to assess the interoperability of what's happening within your local government, understanding what is it that departments do great and where the gaps are. I don't know how deep you are into your financial budget planning currently, so it might be a little too late to come up with to share strategic objectives or ideas and incorporate in your process if you've already been kind of committing to things and making decisions. I think that's okay. I think what I'll continue to do is assess what those gaps are, those challenges are, and then coming July 1 or even day one after town meeting, from there, being able to work a lot more comfortably, meeting with departments and chatting about what their strategic objectives are and what their vision is and what they want to accomplish, for the community. 30 days from now, yeah, that's, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things flying. There's some positions I know that remain vacant that, again, prioritizing and seeing how we can get things rolling and starting the process in where we can fill these roles. But I think, again, day one, if I start in 30 days, that would be my immediate attention.
Okay, all right, good. Along similar lines, 6 months in, what would you have hoped to accomplish? I guess maybe you've already answered that in terms of learning the strategic objectives. Anything to add to that, or
within my first 6 months, starting in 30 days?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think trying to get the town through successfully, getting through its town meeting, I think would obviously be one of them. But also getting to know the select board as well as the finance committee and trying to, really understand what their concerns and priorities might be. Meeting with department heads as well and hearing from them. It's an exploration game and really, I'm the outsider coming into this community, and not just in this community, I'm coming into this region. So it's going to be me really trying to understand, what is it that's great and where are the challenges in where I can be helpful as the town administrator and provide the necessary tools and guidance to the different functions of government that exist in Grafton, so that the community is able to work together to improve the quality of life for everybody. Bernie, go ahead. Did I
Yeah,
answer?
I was just going to try to kind of use that as a segue to talking a little bit about your style of interacting with staff and your style of managing down as well as up.
Yeah.
What does that style look like? If you could give us some examples of how you've used that style in your career?
It's so interesting you mentioned that, Bernie, because I remember in an interview in the past, you had said that that's, not hearing that before, working from the bottom up and middle out. That is my style.
Okay. I learned from you, see?
And here you are, like, I thought you told me not to say that, but yes, that's exactly my style. So bottom line is this, local government is designed so that no one person is in total power and control. It's designed so that there's checks and balances between the different functions that exists. And that means that local government is very dependent on cooperation and collaboration. And I think that, when people step into these roles in these different departments or become elected and serve on your elected positions, I really don't think people tend to come into these roles with the most negative intentions. And I understand that. And I think when you have managers, administrators that work from the top down, it can really set the tone in a negative way and deteriorate the opportunity for cooperation, especially if one is not necessarily directly accountable to the other one. If you have an appointed position versus an elected position. So with that said, my style, yes, Bernie, and I repeat it all the time, it's bottom up and middle out. I don't have all the answers, neither do any other departments. They all the time don't have all the answers, but I rely heavily on the collaboration between myself and other folks that we put into these roles to oversee the statutory responsibilities of that department. I rely heavily on guidance and vice versa. And what we do as a community, we come together, we talk about the issues, we come up with possible solutions, pros and cons for each solutions, and we make those decisions together. And if it happens to be a bad decision, we made it together. So that's my style. Bernie, to that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Any board questions at this point? I want to talk just myself here. All right. Then why don't we move on to financial management? That's an area that clearly requires some collaboration and management. You talked to us about your financial management philosophy, your financial management experience, particularly from the standpoint of dealing with tough financial conditions, as we're probably going to be going into in fiscal year 22.
Yeah, so going back to Blandford and the position that they were in, understand back in 2012, they had a tax collector that embezzled a lot of money. And I think that really was the tipping point for a lot of folks in the community. It brought to light a lot of the concerns that folks have been trying to share and have been disregarded and wouldn't believe it, the red flags. But when 2012 rolled around and the tax collector was indicted, along with a glooming report from the DOR of the financial management, the negative trajectory it was going in as far as the financial management, you had a lot of good-hearted people at that time who stepped in and try to understand the complex environment of its local government. And the reason why I'm starting there is because for the next 3-4 years, you're talking about a community that was consistently in a negative free cash balance calculation. Accounts were being reconciled. There wasn't any timely reporting to the DOR. Vendors weren't being paid in a timely fashion, if at all. Payroll, there were issues there, and this really trickled down and caused other problems for other departments, because everyone in every department that are doing their role is dependent on this core. So when I stepped into Blandford, so before I get there, so it was at that point when the town came together and said, we need a town administrator. We're not getting anywhere. We won't, we're making things worse. Services are being interrupted. So they put in the budget, landed a part-time administrator, and things didn't go well on that front either. Primarily because, administrators there's a community for everybody, and the community wasn't that for that town administrator. But also the problems, was much larger than just the part-time administrator. So then the community at that time then again said we should do a full-time administrator and have a much more robust search process. And then I landed there, which is another long story in itself that Bernie was alluding to earlier on. But when I stepped in, I told, I was working with the select board. We were communicating and trying to identify top priority, and really the number one priority for the community, was basically to have an effective and efficient systems management and operations of the municipal finance. We couldn't really, for any community, it's hard to do all the fun stuff that municipalities like to work on when your in-house is not in order. So with that being said, we've developed SMART goals, our strategic objectives, of which we wanted to accomplish around that goal, on improving the municipal financial management of the town. And we stuck with it. And, again, it's not as easy as it sounds. Obviously, I'm sure I'm sharing the story, and it was a walk in the park. Obviously, there were some growing pains. There were still some people who were used to doing things a certain way, and just, there was resistance to change. We hear those stories all the time. But when I stepped into the role, we made an agreement there that if we're going to meet this number one goal, then, we have to be sure that we're on the same page moving forward. And when these issues or challenges or come up, someone's upset about a decision the town administrator made, so they know the select board member who's a neighbor probably, and bring it up at a meeting and may change everything. We've put those issues and possibilities out on the table, and made sure that, we're going to do what we can, work together to make sure that things like that didn't happen. But certainly no decision I ever made in the town has never been a Josh Garcia decision. It's, when we put our plan together, it was a transparent plan developed collaboratively with the select board. We put together, once we had that agreement, we needed to put people in positions that knew what they were doing, and specifically the financial roles. So we've developed this reorg plan. It was a different financial scheme than the town was used to. So we had to present it on town floor to get folks to understand why this scheme was necessary, to better safeguard their resources, and better, once, like I said, every department's dependent on how we manage our finances. And so if we can strengthen on how we do that, then that's going to in turn improve services all around, stronger free cash balances at the end of the year, which means more investments in stabilization, more investments in opportunities to upgrade our capital needs in the community. And they supported it. And so we were able to get a good team together. And it was them who relied upon, because let's put this out, I'm not a financial guru. I understand there's a basic way of our responsibility to the Commonwealth when it comes to managing funds, and our responsibility to taxpayers. But again, the financial world, it's another very complex environment where even folks like myself is still trying to grapple. But we put folks into these positions to help guide myself and we worked well together because I was able to communicate effectively what they share, communicate that information with the select board and the finance committee so that they can better plan and make decisions on how to spend their focus their resources. It was taking advantage of any technical assistance available to the town, from community compact resources, our relationship with the Division of Local Services. It was great that, once we've implemented all these changes, and we did a state of the town address last year, the same gentleman who wrote the report in 2012, the glooming report when the whole tax collector situation unfolded, he came to that state of the town address and participated in that. And, once the chair of the select board was able to, share a lot of the progress and the direction that we're going, and he stood up and spoke and shared with the community how far the community has come along. Now, it's not, I can't sit in front of you guys and say that this was all me. We did this together, collaboratively. It really took an approach where folks, with different perspective, different personalities, and getting them to navigate the rhetoric and find that common ground so that we can manage the town resources better.
What are some of the elements that you've were incorporated to make that happen?
Some of the elements.
The elements of your financial strategy.
Yep. So, all right. So what we did was once our team was in order, so where do I even start with this? So once we were able to put our team together around the financial operations of it, we had to develop some sort of internal operability of strategies on how we moved funds around. It was a learning curve for a lot of residents to understand that you just can't transfer funds from one account to another without, going to town meeting, or you can't use payroll to pay for expenses, and you can't just negotiate a contract with a vendor without doing procurement and going in front of the select board to sign up, to vote and sign off. So that was like a lot of the new things a lot of folks had to learn and understand. So myself, the treasurer, collector, and the accountant, we put these new systems and policies in place, from having a consistent payment processes when we're paying bills, and making sure that was in line with the same day in which we do payroll. So and how folks submitted their bills as well. We've kind of revamped that whole process. So once we had a practice in place and people fell in line and started following that, at that point we worked with the DOR to develop our financial policies. And it wasn't like we took the DOR policies and we had the select board vote on them and say, that's it, do it. We took it piece by piece. We would take a section, share it with all the department heads, give them 3 weeks to review it, provide comments if they had questions or don't understand it. We met, we talked, and I know it's bureaucratic, but it saves you a headache in the long run when working from the bottom up and middle out. So once we got through that, we were able to draft our first version of our financial management set of policies, and it's still developing. Because we've also set up a reserve account for the finance committee to manage, and there were folks that needed to understand how that worked. There were different stabilization accounts that were created and slowly invested in. There were and so currently, when I talk about developing our financial management policies, we're now at a point where we're coming up with policy in which how we govern these reserves. When free cash becomes available, what percentage should we put away in stabilization before we start, committing to spending these funds on other things. I,
That's good. No, do you do any forecasting? Is forecasting part of your?
So yeah, that was our second community compact. So the DOR did help us put together a financial forecast document, which is an excellent tool. If you really know how to use it, and that's kind of our financial team with Kinshirf and Sarah Hunter, our treasurer collector, and populating the data as it comes up in there so that we can better forecast what's going to happen. If you change the tax rate in year 2, you'll know more or less what your budget just might be. If you paid off some debts, if you're looking at possibly some debts retiring in 2 years, you can in the document is pretty neat. You make a slight change on what it would look when that debt eliminates, and you incorporate that with possible payroll increases in a given fiscal year, and it'll tell you what your budget might be 2 to 3 years from now. I haven't perfected it. It's something that I'm still learning and growing and learning how to use. But again, when you have good, I give a lot of, I know you guys work with Eric Kinshirf as well. If you're asking the right questions with an organization like an outsourced accounting firm like Kinshirf, they can be very helpful in providing you the information and tools you need to better navigate your budgetary needs.
Good. Moving on to, communities never have enough money, so it always requires trying to cut costs and find alternative revenues. And certainly one of the ways that communities fill that gap is economic development. Have you had much experience, and if you haven't, even if you haven't, what are your thoughts on how you would work in Grafton to bring new businesses in, or sort of expand the economic base of the town?
So economic development in Blandford, different region, different area. You're talking about a small town, one of six towns that share a regional school district, and each town contributes to the greater economic viability to that 6-town region. So what we did, and it started during my time at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, where it used to be 7 towns that share a school district, and one pulled out. And when that one town pulled out, it really set this storm across the other communities. So it was at that point where the municipality said, this is a symptom of a larger problem, and the problem was that the student body population was declining, cut in half from its peak. And so when we looked closer at the data, and we recognized that the population was aging. Some of the communities had a steady decline of population overall, and so tax rates continue to go up. So you look at the data and you start, the answer at the time when we formed this, what the group is called Hilltown Collaborative, was that we needed to do something different and focus efforts on doing what we can to help 2 things. One, not just leverage opportunities to promote economic development and growth within the 6-town region, but also number 2, have that collaborative be the space in which where communities can talk, these small towns can talk about best practices and identify opportunities for efficiencies and how communities operate. It's not uncommon for probably even in Grafton for for the town to look at their interoperability and the services that they provide, and looking at and may quickly realize that if you just did things a little differently and you move things around, you might be able to improve that service at a at a more cost-effective cost. So, you know, we worked together. It was a collaboration with area organizations and businesses to really work on the objectives we've identified in that group to help advance the idea of economic development. But in a community like Grafton, you know, much larger, you have a economic base, you know, small to larger scale businesses, I'm sure. And, you know, do you have, I'm assuming you have organizations within the community that focus on business support and economic development and whatnot. So you got all these organizations. So what you quickly realize is you have these organizations that want to help. And then you have, you know, this local government that has some degree of access to information and additional resources and even leadership. You know, it's being able to establish that collaborative relationship between the local government and those organizations and see what flexibilities we can identify to leverage each other's strengths in support of achieving some degree of economic growth, depending on what area we're talking about when we're talking about economic development. There's a whole lot I want to say on this subject area, and it's just leaving me at the moment.
Okay.
But if you have any other questions around that, Bernie.
Yep. All right. No, that's good. If board members, as we get farther into it, if board members or you want to talk about something else related to this, that would be, you know, we can always go back to that. I guess I want to move over to personnel management, though, in terms of, you know, beyond the, you know, responsibility of sort of managing your organization, which we've talked about, the financial side of things and the economic development. At the core of the organization is going to be the people. You know, what's been your experience with collective bargaining and hiring staff, motivating staff, evaluating staff? Talk to us about your personnel management experience.
Yeah, no, I think I touched upon a little bit earlier on, Bernie, when I talked about, you know, in Grafton. Yeah, absolutely. I've managed contracts and the town's, you know, contractual and service obligations as an employer to the different employees. You know, I've coordinated hiring and you know, dealt with disciplining as allowed in you know, personnel bylaws and union contracts. I've engaged in collective bargaining before. I've participated in them when I was on the school board and on the fire commission, as well as my time as town administrator. It's, you know, we do have a union in the Blandford. It's nowhere near probably as big as Grafton, but we have one. I've provided oversight and facilitated health insurance needs and other employee benefits and coordinated payroll. I didn't do payroll, but, you know, I oversaw employees, reviewed submitted timesheets to ensure accuracy and had them submitted to payroll in a timely manner. You know, you know, there's again, just like in larger communities, smaller towns, we have the same statutory obligations when it comes to these things. And there's a basic framework on how it operates, and it's understanding how that framework is and executing accordingly.
Okay, all right. In terms of your the collective bargaining that you've done, what's been the style of your negotiations? And you mentioned about the health insurance. If you know, have you made that a sort of a focus of any of your negotiations? But let's talk about your style. What's the approach that you use when you go into the collective bargaining sessions?
So it's really it's we're at, you know, it's understanding what not necessarily the needs, but the desires. And whatever the desires might be, you know, the key thing for me, my mindset, is understanding both the short-term and long-term budgetary impacts of the desires of the contractual terms that people are looking for. I think, there's a reason why, and I know people have different opinions on how they feel about unions. It can be great, and there's a reason why they exist. It can also be a challenge. And if there is a challenge, again, it's a symptom of a larger problem. And what we need to do as managers is to make sure that we're providing an environment in which where people feel good about working for the town and the people they work for, so that you're not necessarily facing the kind of challenges that we might read about in the paper sometimes in other communities. But again, understanding what the desires are we doing enough within our parameters to provide a working environment for folks that's safe and equitable for the folks that work for the town, and taking the information or the requests, the negotiating requests that are on the table, and working with our select board with navigating those requests, making sure that whatever terms that we're going to agree to, that certainly there's no negative impact or longer term negative impact to the budgetary constraints of the community. And we do that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of complex legalese that come up in the process, and you want to make sure that you guys have a counsel, right? Town counsel, the town attorney, that we're being properly guided as well, that we're not setting ourselves up for anything that's going to bring potential harm now or even into the future to local taxpayers.
What do you have you been? It's never an enjoyable thing, certainly, but have you been in the position where you've had to discipline employees and terminate employees? And I'm not saying you need to do that in Grafton, but
No.
it is always.
Thankfully, thank you, Bernie. Yeah, thankfully, no, and I'll tell you why. And I think I talked about this during my the initial interview with the review group. So, like I said earlier on, you step into these roles, folks are in positions, and people generally want to do well, and they want to succeed, and they want to help. Everyone wants to help. What I try to do is work with folks where they are, wherever their knowledge capacity might be, and provide them, be it training or guidance, and build that relationship so that the employees we're working with know that that I support them, that we're here to figure this out and work together and build. And in Blandford, I've built those relationships. We didn't have personnel policies, so I used, I had for a while used one as kind of the de facto placeholder until we've been able to develop them a lot better than what they were, and actually have the select board vote them in and confirm them as the official policies. But the policies, they're the guiding light. I mean, I think as issues when they appear, they provide the tools to be able to best navigate certain issues. And a lot of times, what I found when I was, having been working in Blandford for the 3 years I've been there, folks, if they're not doing well in the role, and the intentions are not as good as what I like them to be, and they're really trying to create some sort of a challenge in the town, they eventually get cornered to a point where they kind of just step down on their own when they know that no matter who they complain to on issues, and because that the basis of the argument might not be there, to a point where I just don't have to fire anybody to that, to a point where I just go in and just say you're fired. I think there's mistakes that happen, and there's policies that help govern those mistakes, and there's also the skill and ability that I have to be able to connect with folks and in a way that shows some opportunity there to level and do things better. So there's been problem employees, and those employees have never had an issue to a point where I need to necessarily fire. But instead, if they're trying to cry wolf or go out into the community or into the community Facebook page and say, XYZ, or this is what's going on, we navigate those easily because, I'm very transparent and very communicative, with my select board, with the different departments, to the point where, people just kind of think to themselves and say, really, I don't see that's not what's going on. I think folks kind of just start telling their peers and saying, hey, look, I think you got the wrong idea, to the point where folks just kind of get cornered and just gracefully just step down on their own. But there hasn't been any major incident, though, that's taken place where an immediate firing needed to take place. And if there was, again, there's policies in place that help govern that, so that again, it's reducing any potential liability, reducing the harm that can come back to the town. I do have faith in people, and I do what I can to help folks grow and make sure that people are succeeding and are looking good and doing well in the responsibilities they're given. And that rubs off, and I think that spreads across, and people see that, and folks kind of respect that and want to be part of that team, want to be part of that environment. It really, and that's what happened at Blandford. And Blandford, since I've been there, what people tell me before I was there is, I can't imagine. It's weird to me, because since I've been there, the culture and the environment at Town Hall has been very different versus from what I've heard before. And I hear stories too with my town administrator peers in other communities, and again, issues that come up on the paper. And I hope and pray that one day those types of issues never have to come this way. Issues are inevitable. They're gonna happen, and that's why we're there, town administrators, and collaboratively with the select board. We're there to navigate those issues the best we can, so that we can continue to make sure that services aren't interrupted, that liability is not coming back to the town one shape or form, and making sure we're using the tools available to us to navigate those challenges. Bernie, earlier on, you talked about what I stepped into at Blandford. The first month I was there, it's no secret, the police department resigned. And it was all of a sudden national news. The chair of my select board was freaking out at the time. And my conversation with her, well, first, number one, that issue with the police force, again, a symptom of a larger problem of what was happening in that community. Not just with the police department, with other departments as well. They just took it to the level that they did. That's a position you never want to be in as a community. But those issues happen. They start bubbling up. You're in executive session talking about a new issue that's arising, or a select board member wanting to talk about another issue that's bubbling up over here. I don't like to be in a position where I'm being reactive. They happen. You do what you can to implement a solution, and after that, you put a plan together to make sure it doesn't happen again. That resonates with me. That follows me in when I'm managing employees, when we're managing vendors, when we're dealing with members of the public. We do what we can to de-escalate these issues from coming up and preventing them from happening to begin with. But they happen, and you do what you can to solve it and move forward.
Okay. procurement issues. You mentioned the necessity of following procurement law. You have your MCPPO certification?
Yeah, I did the first course that
Okay.
we had to do.
Yeah.
And my time at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, my immediate supervisor was the chief procurement officer. He's the #2 guy in the agency. He was also the chief procurement officer. So that's where I learned a lot of my knowledge in the procurement world. I got to facilitate my own procurements, but obviously it was under his guidance. I've been doing it at my time at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission as the appointed chief procurement officer. At no means I'm no expert though. The laws are there, and the experiences build. And when it's larger scale, we're talking about small projects, less than between 10 and 50,000, and I'm comfortable. But when you're talking about more than 100,000 or a multi-million-dollar project, at that point, at Blandford, like for example, we're in the process of hiring an owner's project manager to build a new highway garage and rehabilitate the existing highway garage to get it ready for fire use for the fire department. It was hovering around $1 million, and it was required that, through procurement law, that we hired an owner's project manager. And, we're learning this. But, when it comes to that, if I can't do it or don't feel comfortable myself, what we're doing at Blandford, we're contracting with Franklin Regional Council of Governments that provides the service to help provide the oversight and the guidance. And, even during this process, you continue to learn. I took the course, and next year, there's the second course you take after the intro. I plan to take that and continue to grow my skill in procurement.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was where I was going with it, and you kind of went into it, is the project management. So you've sort of shepherded that highway, but it's just getting started, the highway garage, and because there's always another part of is managing projects.
So that's and that's so in local government, there's bureaucracy, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to these projects. And it's all confined within not just procurement laws, and depending on what project it is, if it's a goods and services or a public building project of some kind, or public construction, you're confined within the parameters of that law, which is complex in itself. And all of that, you got a given fiscal year to you have your timeline you're constrained in. And it's always this cart before the horse. You have these discussions, and you're like, well, we know what we want to do, and how do we get it to a point where we're doing it? You think you have some progress in the discussion, but later you find out that procurement law doesn't allow that. And you want to know what the cost, you just want to know what the cost is so you can build a project, so you're not going to town floor looking for funds with a blank check. People want to see your proposal. And so town meetings in May, and here we are now in January, and it turns out that the timeline is much more aggressive, and it won't be ready till town. So there's all these moving parts that are involved when it comes to managing projects. You might talk about at the select board level, but the finance committee is like, hey, when are you going to talk to us? So you gotta, it's understanding the path ahead, and just kind of facilitating that and making sure you're hitting your objectives, your targets in that process. Nothing's more frustrating than just sitting around constantly talking about something. You do a plan, you do another plan, and another feasibility plan, and then the department says we don't have the manpower, we need more staff to help with. It's just really what it is. It's it's a football team without a quarterback. You got all your players where they need to be, and they're all great and they can do a good job. I never felt like more money was a solution. It's really the quarterback being able to manage what they have and looking forward on what the steps are that they need to navigate to get to that touchdown. And then getting to a point where you're signing that contract and you're executing the service.
Okay.
Is really the crux of project management. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to local governments because there's a lot of things involved. But really, you take a step back, understand the path ahead, and you execute. You move forward with managing that project
Okay.
from
Good.
the start line to the finish line and even beyond.
Good. We've touched upon a whole bunch of topics here, from management and style and finance and economic development, personnel, project management. You've even gotten into the work that you've done with, communication and engagement and what you inherited in Blandford. How do you stay current on trends and where do you learn to get new ideas for what to bring to Blandford?
It all depends on what we're talking about. So let's say first and foremost, right? Like we're all in this role to do what we can to improve the quality of life. That's what we want to do, is improve the quality of life. But in order to do that, you have to understand your population and its health. And also, you want to do this equitably where you're doing it for everybody. You might have a certain population or multiple parts of your population that are vulnerable, whether it's low income or elderly, or many folks who are disabled. Understanding your community health, I think, helps us as managers to know what resources to leverage and where to put our focus, and you incorporate that into your objectives for the fiscal year, right? We might collect, together with the select board, come up with the top 3 things that we want to accomplish for next year, whatever the case. And we have limited resources, and we want to make sure that we're investing those resources in areas that's equitably building our community. So understanding the community health, and the reason why I say, it's good to start there is because again, it depends what we're talking about. There's, you have federal resources, you have resources coming from the Commonwealth to help advance certain subject areas. If it's doing a full-scale assessment, or maybe even putting together a master plan, or if it's issues around operations for things that your DPWs work on, your parks, your infrastructure, your sidewalks, your streets. Once you know your community health, where the issues are, the easier it is to focus and deploy resources in that area to advance. But to your question, where do I get my information from? My ear's relatively close to the ground. In this position, town administrators everywhere, we're involved within our group. Each one, depending on the size, has its own association. Blandford, we got the Small Town Administrator of Massachusetts, communities of 7,000 or less. And I think the next phase up there is the MMMA, the Municipal Managers Association, which are the groups, and they meet regularly and they talk and they share information. And if I don't have answers to solve a complex problem, they're there to help you out. And we're working together with folks from the Commonwealth. The DLS is they're a great resource. They do work all across the Commonwealth, and their ear is very close to the ground as far as best practice and what other municipalities are doing. So making sure that the space is there to communicate information and learn and know what's going on and what other communities are doing so that I can bring it to, if it's something we can do in our community and in line with some of our goals, hey, I want to do it too. And then CMRPC, your regional planning organization, you know, they have folks that are focused in certain subject areas that, you know, their ears are really close to the ground on laws as they change, and making sure that, you know, we're able to leverage the tools there to support our departments and ensure that we're, you know, up to date with the latest and implementing the projects that are eligible to us. So that's the, you know, as far as where I get my information. I wasn't sure, Bernie, if your question was alluded to at all and how I maintain communication with departments in the community. Was that part of that question too, or?
It wasn't, but
Oh, okay.
why don't you touch upon that?
Oh, well, so, you know, going back to when I told you about meeting with the select board, and our number one goal and priority was around financial management. Our number two goal was communication. You know, like anywhere else, it happens. Folks work in silos. The challenge is, you know, all those departments are separate and one might not have full control and authority of the other. We're all dependent on one another and how we function. And in Blandford, it just, there was no communication at all. Someone will, you know, so there was two things I did. I do regular communications with, there's several different ways of how I communicate information. I have an all department communication where I send out weekly general updates of what's happening at town hall and what's coming down the pipeline, and as far as town management, as far as, you know, their responsibility, sharing all department expense reports on a bi-weekly basis so that everyone knows where they are in their, you know, in their budget expenditures in a given fiscal year. When there's, you know, changes around a new project that we're working on, and that, you know, I just continuously to share communication with all the departments together in one email blast that I put out there, and that turned out to be helpful. The other piece of communication is my own newsletter that comes out of my office to anybody who subscribes to it, and that is things not really the interoperability minutia that the community externally probably doesn't care about, doesn't need to know, but instead just kind of sharing the progress that we're doing internally to solve some of whatever they might have heard in Blandford's past, and also, you know, announcing different projects we're working on, and it's also been a tool that's been effective when I need help. You know, I need to get, you know, we need to get new members to serve on a board or a committee. Folks have kind of really used, have been able to look forward, at least the feedback that I get, you know, they look forward for those newsletters because there's no other way in a small town like Blandford for them to get this kind of information, for them to be in the know of what's going on. And then there's different communication information that I share directly to my select board. So I do stay on top of that. I know it's yes, time consuming. You have to sit down, you have to do it while other things are going on, but it saves me a great deal of headache when I put in that time.
That's actually my last question is relationship with the board and the interaction with the selectmen, the communication. So
Yep.
Drill into that and tell me how you communicate with the board, what that report looks like, and what do you do midweek or whatever, mid-report or between reports to let the board know what's happening in town, and what do you see as the role of the administrator of the board?
Yeah. So coming into this role, first and foremost, we got to understand the board is the chief executive authority of the community. They're the CEO of the town, like a mayor in a city, let's say. So, you know I come into this role serving at the direction of excuse me, the select board. And, you know, it's in my style where I have to, anything that comes in the pipeline or comes through there's nothing that I do that my board does not know. So if I'm constantly updating them weekly, if not weekly, bi-weekly, and to the extent of what they even want to know too. Maybe, you know, sometimes it's just, hey, when it's this, just talk directly to the chair. If it's a much bigger thing, just let us all know, and, you know, and kind of meeting them there. But these are things that, you know, I communicate consistently because it's going to help me address some follow-up questions that a member might have, and they'll just call me or come to the office and want to expand on something that I shared. So then when we're having that public meeting, you know, we're not talking too much time on a particular issue because we've learned what we need to learn, and we've kind of gave a solid overview for the members of the public of how they understand it. But also too, you know, not just time in a meeting, but also, you know, just time in the long term, you know, not if they don't necessarily understand something and have to table it and then maybe bring it up again to the next meeting. And, you know, so if I can provide that information ahead of time so that they're in the know. And also if something's going on and they hear it, so that I'm never in a position where if they hear something from somebody else, you know, I want them to be able to respond right then and there and not just say, hey, let me get back to you on that. So it's you know, it's time consuming to communicate information and put these reports together, but it helps with progress. It reduces headaches in the long term. And the same thing goes with dealing with the public. My door has always been open. Folks will come in, and there's never been a moment where, even during really busy moments, where I had to tell somebody, come back in 2 hours or give me a call later, I'm busy. Well, maybe 1 or 2 times in the 3 years I've been there. But, you know, every person that comes into the office, you know, their issue might not be a priority for me, but it's a priority for them. And no one calls the town administrator's offices to talk about how glory things are. They're calling there, something's going on that's impacting them. So being able to take that time and acknowledging the issue and listening to the concern, that investment of time also reduces headaches and potential problems in the long term. And then as these problems come up, keeping my finger on the pulse, again, communicating that information with the select board. Hey, you know, there's this concern that was brought up and I want you to know. So Bernie, I
Yep.
hope that answers the question, and
Yep.
I'm looking at the time and you probably have another candidate waiting, and
We're gonna.
unless we can continue, I'd be more than
No.
happy to.
No,
continue.
we are running out of time, but I want to give the board a chance if there's any questions that they've had, or give you a chance to, you know, make any closing comments. Any board questions that want to dig into anything? No?
Yeah, I'll just want to say, you know, Joshua, thank you for coming in tonight. I appreciate your outlook on how you work with the select board, the process that you outlined with communications. It was very informative, and thank you very much for sharing that. But you've answered my questions that I actually had written down. But thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, Peter.
Great.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, sort of same for me. I had the opportunity to kind of ask you a bunch of questions before. And Bernie did a good job of going through things, but you know, your experience is impressive. And I think I can probably speak for all of us and say that we're really impressed with what you did in Blandford and how you turned that situation around. So it was really a pleasure having you in.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that.
Right. Closing comments.
Well, I mean, the only closing comment really is, this has been great. I really appreciate the time. Again, I get it. I understand, you know, the positions you're in, you know, it's, you guys have families at home, I'm sure. You work your day jobs. It's long days, and you step up into these roles, and this is the truest form here of local control, you know, local control and our responsibilities to step up and take care of the needs of our community. So certainly is a pleasure that you've been able to spend that time with me through this. And I wish you guys well. I'm gonna echo the comment that Evan made. If you pick Evan, I support it 100%. He's a great guy. But again, thank you for having me, and the best of luck to you.
Great. Very good. Thanks, Josh.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming in,
Thank you.
Josh.
Thank you. All right, our next candidate we told to come in a little bit later, so I think we're gonna probably have him at 7:30. So that's all right, 7:25, 7:30. That gives us a couple minutes.
Yeah, if anyone wants to take a quick break, I think this would be a good time to do that. And we will reconvene precisely at 7:30. So we'll just go into a brief recess for right now.
All right.
All right, thanks for coming in tonight. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Peter Carlson. I'm the chair of the Grafton Select Board, and let the other members introduce themselves. You want to go, Mr. Austin?
Sure. Hi, good evening, Ari. It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
I'm already giving you points because you're a cat guy. Welcome.
You lost the beard too, I noticed, yeah.
I did, yeah. I see you've been watching some meetings.
I have been doing research.
Love it.
Mr. Prisby?
Barry, we've met before in the search
Yeah,
committee,
hi,
but thanks for coming back in. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Roy?
Hi, Ari, Colleen. Nice to meet you.
Hi, you
Everybody
too.
should-
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for inviting me back.
Well, Larry, we're going to hopefully we're going to go through a bunch of questions tonight and give you a chance to let the board know about you and your skills, and we'll dig into some of these the questions that we've the board and I have worked on to do that. So let's start with the easy ones. Who are you and why are you here? So what tell us a little bit about yourself and what prompts you to be looking at Grafton as a place to come and work.
Right. You don't mean that question existentially, Bernie. I can
No,
tell
I
you.
don't.
Yeah. It's again, I'm really pleased to be back with you, or to be invited to be with the select board. If you've seen my resume, so I don't think I need to go into too much detail. I've been in local government pretty much my entire career, aside from starting out in Capitol Hill for a couple of years. I've always been interested in government. It's really been made my career. It probably goes back to my parents who were public servants themselves. And I've been always looking for opportunities, throughout my career to expand myself and to do things that I hadn't done before. In this case, I did have some experiences for a couple of years, as you know, as a town manager for a small town outside Philadelphia, much earlier in my career. That was a formative experience for me, very educational. I was probably a little too young at the time, and the town had a number of issues that made things interesting, but I learned a lot from it. And from there, I went back down to DC, which is where I met my wife, and we kind of considered home at the time, and made my way through the ranks in a large county, and then worked in a smaller county as a director, and then came up here to New Bedford. I grew up in Maine, so I've always considered myself a New Englander, and all across my career, I was looking for opportunities to kind of come back up here. So when New Bedford came across as an opportunity, I kind of jumped at it. I consider myself a manager. A lot of my experience, I know, has been in finance. I'm not an accountant, however. I am, consider myself a public manager and probably a public finance manager as well. I have managed government at all levels and all sizes, but at the department level as well as in the executive side, and now at the policy level as the CFO for the city of New Bedford. And at this point in my career, I've been around for a while. I'm really looking for an opportunity to be a CAO of a jurisdiction and really get the opportunity to work with the board and help execute culture change and bring bring the organization on the right path.
Well, and this is a question that we're putting to all of our finalists. So, you were quick to point out that you were a town manager at a small town in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So you've worked in small towns, and you come from Maine, so everything in Maine is small, right?
Unless Portland, yeah.
Unless we're in Portland. But you've been working in large organizations and large municipalities in some cases. Certainly New Bedford is larger than Grafton. Do you see any issues, or what do you see as the issues of transitioning to a smaller town and a smaller organization?
A lot of it I'm looking forward to. One of the things about being in a large organization is you kind of have your lanes. And the part of the interesting part of the job I've had in New Bedford has been kind of breaking down silos and bringing together a cohesive finance team. We've instituted a lot of useful change and progress in New Bedford that I'm very proud of. But it's, I'm really kind of looking for the opportunity to steer an organization overall and provide that culture. I think that in the case of Grafton, you're talking about a jurisdiction that is of some size. It's smaller, but it is growing and has a lot of upside opportunity. I think probably my experience and background brings some varied experience to a town like Grafton that you wouldn't necessarily have right away. And that could be very useful, both on the economic development side, some of my relationships that I have with the state, with MMA, as well as my experience taking an organization, developing a culture, building it, and finding ways to bring that forward as a high-performing organization. New Bedford is bigger than Grafton. It's about 1,000 employees on the general government side and about 2,000 on the schools. I think some things are probably more easily scaled down than scaled up. And those are things that I do. I've been a working manager pretty much my whole life, so I'm not concerned about anything, having to do the work. I like doing the work. That this would be a good opportunity, I think, to affect change at the ground level in a way that perhaps in a large organization I may not get. I would note that Fauquier County, which was my position prior to New Bedford, I've been in New Bedford for 8 years, and prior to that I worked in Fauquier County. It's a relatively small county. I took that position leaving Loudoun County to have an opportunity to be a department head and direct report to the county administrator. But the population of Fauquier is only about 60,000 or so. So, and it has a small town vibe, small county vibe. In Virginia, counties are king. Everything, all the services are right at the county level. And the Fauquier was no different. It was mainly an agrarian, kind of a rural locality that's changing a bit and developing, especially to the north. There's certain parallels, I think, with Grafton that'll probably be useful as well in terms of some of the issues that you have.
Okay. Well, making the transition, so you sort of explained how you would make that transition or how that transition would happen, or the elements of a transition. What would your entry plan look like? What, you're appointed, come 30 or 60 days, you start. What do you do to enter into this new world of Grafton?
So I think the first thing you got to do, the biggest mistake that any manager makes, who makes a mistake coming into an organization, is they miss managing in a certain direction. They may focus on managing down, but not manage up. They may manage up but not manage down, or not manage out. And I think the first thing that'd be very important is to make sure that there's harmony and unity in terms of what my primary objectives are and what I'm looking for and what the select boards are. So that, because really the town administrator is select board's agent. That's the job. You hire a town administrator to take care of those details, do the things actually the policy you want to get, make sure the organization is functioning well, and ensure that it's moving forward in a way that's good for the taxpayers and good from a performance standpoint. And that's something that's something that sure, I have my ideas and I'll have my ideas, but really the policy needs to come from you guys, and needs to be a direction that you feel comfortable going in. I think part of my job is to help identify landmines before they happen, make sure we don't step into those together. But the things that I do in my mind, as there can be no daylight between what I do and what select board wants and what you want me to do. I think it's very important, because really I'm just your arm, I'm just your kind of right arm. So that's something that I feel very strongly about. So the first thing I'd want to do is work with all of you to make sure that we have then we have to go through a whole big visioning exercise, but just some common ideas about what direction to go. Beyond that, I try to get a good assessment of the community, a good assessment of the staff. I don't believe in going in and sort of blowing up an organization. It's not an effective thing to do. Just the bits I've read here in the paper, I think you probably have a few challenges, but any organization does. But it's not effective for a foreign agent to come along and just kind of be seen by the organization at large as a threat. It's something that they can't work with. They need to see me as somebody who is there for them, who's a supporter for them. The organization does, while at the same time I'm there for you. So I'm managing in all directions. So I would do the best I could to try to get a sense of what the organization is like, what its values are like, who the key players are. And then one other thing I'd want to do pretty early on, and hopefully I'm not jumping ahead to another question, Bernie, but I think this is all part of the same thing. One thing that I want to do that's really important early on is getting a sense of the community itself and making contacts in the community. Leaning on you to some degree as far as some of the key players go, but also just getting a sense of who it is in the community that is involved and interested, who are the gadflies, who are the people who help us out, who are the people who all those things that any community has, and just kind of make it known that I'm available and accessible to everyone. Because again, that's another way that I really can help the select board out, by being that sort of eyes and ears and being that presence for all of you. So those are kind of the three or four major things. It's really all about I think I covered every direction there. Just assessing those things. And then in the near term, of course, is always going to be the day by day, getting a sense of what's going on, what contracts are out there, hires, budget process is coming up, things along all those things along those lines. This isn't the worst time to hire somebody. It probably, I don't know if it would have been worse to do it like right at town meeting time. That probably would have been worse. But this is, but there will be some challenges here, and you know, in terms of the turnover and process. And I know, you know, that whole transition process is something that I would probably want to start up even before I actually started on the job, but I'd want to start to get a sense of the organization and people, and maybe, yeah, take some meetings that way as well.
Okay, great. And don't be shy about worrying about another question. This is it's better this way, where it's sort of a dialogue that we hit the questions as we're going along, and it's all very organic how it all happens, right? But you know, you started to talk, actually some of what you were talking about with, you know, managing out and how you go about doing that. It sort of starts to bring us into our next question, which is talking about management style. But I want to talk about your management style. And it kind of relates a little bit to what we were just talking about, you know, I think you referred to it as a foreign enemy coming in, or if I heard you correctly.
Or an agent, yes.
Or an agent, thank you. But one of your references said, Mr. Sky is a transformational figure for the city of New Bedford.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we'll find out who it was. But I want to understand that notion that, you know, they talked about how you've transformed the city departments under your purview to create structures and systems. And so you brought fresh new ideas to New Bedford. How does that tie into that notion? How does that tie into your management style?
So I think it's a good question. I think this is probably my experience in New Bedford is a good kind of case study in the approach I try to take. And it's an approach that I've learned over the years. It's, you know, I think probably 30 years ago, I know 30 years ago, I would have come into an organization and just tried to, you know, this is my stamp, this is my mark. Organizations don't work that way. You know, my theory of organizational behavior has always been they kind of act like an organism. You know, a new agent comes into that organism. The first thing we're going to do is the first thing the organism is going to try to do is look at that agent and decide whether it's a threat or a friend. And if it decides that it's a threat and decides that it's not, you know, helpful to the organization, to the organism, that organization will unite and you will fail. And the thing you need to do is show how you're helpful and respectful of the organization and the people there. I would never want to come into an organization with some attitude like, you know, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I'm going to show you all how to do it right because you're doing it wrong forever. I've been in organizations where someone does that and that happens, and that person doesn't usually last very long, and it tends to cause a lot of tumult and cause the organization to reject that individual and use back to square one. It's not good for anybody. So when I came to New Bedford, and I'm familiar with the history, but you know, New Bedford, of course, is a fairly old line city and has some challenges. Probably fiscal challenges are a little greater than, the different challenges than Grafton has. And one of the things that the mayor, John Mitchell, had identified when he was first elected was the need for a chief financial officer. And that was something that had been identified in the past as well. New Bedford had no CFO prior to me. I'm the first CFO. So my position was created by ordinance. It took several years for them to fill it, and get around to filling it. And it was Mayor Mitchell that decided to do that. And when my position was created by ordinance, was designed to knit together 5 different departments that were considered the finance team. And those 5 departments were the assessor's office, the auditor's office, which is like the town accountant. You know, it's a city. The city construct is called the auditor. Purchasing department, the IT department, and the treasurer's office. And our goal was to put them together as an independent whole, not necessarily as a single department, but overseen by me as direct reports. And this is the only structure like that in New Bedford. So all the other department heads report to the mayor or through the mayor's office. In my case, they report to me, and for these 5. And the first thing I tried to do was build an esprit de corps. There were some staff that were able to accept the change, some that weren't. We were able to make those changes over the first year or so, and build this sense of this team. We do everything from in terms of building that sense of team. We do everything from sort of kind of the light and silly. We have annual retreats. We have an annual holiday party for the entire staff, for all 50 of our team. We have a Yankee swap. It's a lot of fun. Everyone gets to kind of, everyone gets to pick on me, try to take my present away and so on. It's a lot of fun. And we also, we have common messages and common themes. We have a shared strategic plan and a shared mission statement and so on. And the whole idea is to kind of knit this group together that's interdependent. There have been a number of improvements that have happened to the city's performance as a result of that. Before I came, there was one point in the mid 2000s the city was in danger of being taken over by DOR. We're now a AA community. We have an award-winning budget from GFOA. We have a CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and we have we've automated our purchasing system. We have a new ERP, a new financial system, and so on. So we've done a lot of big time change, and we've done it in a way that where everyone's been involved and engaged, and the right staff is there and are energetic and determined to move forward. So it's been really positive. So what I try, and my general approach has been to try to engage and be respectful of everybody. Doors always open. It's a cliche, but it's true. And I always find time to meet with everybody from the clerk level all the way to the department head if they need to talk to me, and to ensure that everyone knows that they're respected and valued, and that we have expectations as far as performance goes, not unreasonable ones, but when they do that, when they perform, we recognize it and praise them for it,
Good.
and correct otherwise. So.
All right. Well, let's you started to let's take that as a sort of the results that you mentioned of what you took on. I didn't realize that New Bedford was at risk of takeover.
In 2006, there was a Susan Bump's office did a study, the whole deal. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there was an issue with it was before my time, of course, but there was an issue with a capital bond that had been overspent.
Okay.
It's a classic example of one side not watching what the other side was doing. Treasurer's office would do one thing, the auditor's office would do something else, and the two would not meet.
Okay.
So that was one of the reasons I recommended a CFO.
Okay. All right. So how did you, when you came in as CFO and you sort of inherited that, and I'm trying to remember, I don't have your resume right in front of me. What year did you start in New Bedford?
2013.
2013. Oh, okay. All right. So what actions have you taken in terms of managing the city's finances to, get the bond upgrade, to stabilize the finances and so on? How does that reflect your approach to financial management?
So we have our, it's everywhere from the mundane things like getting the Schedule A in on time, stuff like that, to having the tax rate set as early as possible, producing producing the city's first CIP. City never had a CIP before I came along, so we have a biennial capital needs assessment process, which rolls into the 5-year CIP, which is updated every year, and so on. And we have a structure in place for that. We have a long-range plan that has gotten a lot of praise from the rating agencies. We have a process in place now to address OPEB. It's not a lot of money going to OPEB, but we're doing something. And we have that's other post-employment benefits. I'm sure you guys know that, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Just make sure. I didn't want to talk about lingo, jargon. And also, I think the whole process of hiring a CFO in its own right probably was considered a positive move as far as the rating agencies go as well. I've also cultivated a lot of relationships. I had a learning curve. Massachusetts finance is very different than everywhere else. And most of my career was in Virginia. Virginia is classic GAAP accounting. It's very straightforward. It's what most businesses do. Massachusetts, as we know, finance is a bit of a different animal. So, it took me a little while to learn that. I'd say it took me about a year before I really, really understood that we don't actually have a revenue budget until we set the tax rate. So I really had incorporated that into my brain. But it's been a process, and I'm pretty fluent now in mass finance. Learning mass public procurement law. I've taken a fair amount of time trying to getting up to speed on that as well, and cultivating contacts outside of the organization as well. I think it's on my resume. I'm very active in MMA. I'm on the fiscal policy committee. There's a lot of people up there. John Robertson and Jeff Beckwith and so on. And I'm very active in GFOA as well. So those are all ways that I try to find to keep myself sort of engaged and interested. I would imagine with this position, I'd probably want to be kind of, have some level of activity in ICMA as well, or instead, or something along those lines too.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that, whether you would remain involved with GFOA.
Well, I'm a budget reviewer. I'd probably continue doing that because I think it's a useful thing to do. And it gives me a sense of what's going on out there as far as quality of budgets. I can do that without being, super involved. But I would think that my primary organization, I'd probably be MMMA and ICMA.
Okay. Obviously, you utilize financial planning in your course of business, and fiscal forecasts, financial policies, and okay, all right. Well, let's talk about economic development. I mean, I think when it comes to finance, we could probably all just stipulate that you know that, since you've done
without
that.
objection, yeah.
Yeah, without objection. So, Attorney Prisby, does that work the way I did that? Okay.
I have a JLMC hearing next week, so I've been learning all about I've got all that in my brain right now.
All right. When you look at Grafton, what experiences would you bring to economic development, and how would you see yourself moving that forward for the town?
So I think my experience, especially in Loudoun and in New Bedford, are both particularly relevant. Loudoun County, Virginia, I was there for 11 years, is usually the fastest or one of the fastest growing counties in the country. Give you a sense of how fast it grew while I was there. When I started in 1997, there were about 120,000 people in Loudoun. By the time I left in 2008, there were about 270,000 people. Now the population is close to 500,000. So it's crazy. So we had economic development issues before us all the time. Now the structures in Virginia are a bit different, but one of the things that we dealt with a lot was residential development and fiscal impact analysis. And I did a lot of work on that. And that's something that's carrier transferable, I think. The sort of estimating the impact of residential development on school population and on the commercial outflow and things like that. In New Bedford, I'm very involved. We have an economic development commission, but my office has a lot of interaction with that commission. I believe I believe the director was one of my references, Derek Sanos, and the work I do with the EDC involves a lot of analysis and estimation of impact and so on. And I'm a member of the TIF board as well. And we work directly with developers on proposed TIFs, on HDIP, STAs, so on. So I'm familiar with all the structures. And right now in New Bedford, we're working on a very large business park development as well, which I've been deeply involved in with mass development, taking half of our municipal golf course and bring that into a business park. And that's been a very eye-opening process as well. I've met a lot of people at mass development over time for that as well.
Right, so your involvement though has gone beyond just sort of the analysis of the impact and the TIF. Has it reached to the planning phase of how you plan, like in the golf course redevelopment? That would be. Have you been involved in the planning of that?
I've been in the meetings. I wouldn't say that I've been the one. I'm not taking the straight edge and mapping out the test fits and so on.
Okay.
I'm not a planner, nor would I claim to be. But there's a lot of kind of, there's a lot of discussion that I get involved in that involves kind of the interaction and the fit between sort of concept and execution and what that looks like in terms of downstream impact and so on. So that's where most of my involvement comes in.
Okay. What about in terms of kind of working hand in hand to get businesses to choose Grafton?
Right. So some things sell themselves and some things don't. You're not going to, unless you're not going to get a developer into a room with spinny discs and convince him that Grafton is the place he has to be. But there are aspects to the community and that you can sell. Things that should be kind of part of the strategic effort, is identifying those things that are the most marketable about the community and who that would be good for. I know that Grafton is a really interesting opportunity from a development standpoint, I think, in the sense of kind of your northern edge, you have a little more commercial industrial presence and aspect. You're closer to Mass Pike. You're really part of the Worcester suburb. You're really kind of a Worcester suburb, and there's a lot of opportunity there for new development. It's a beautiful town, probably one of the nicest commons I think I've ever seen. So, which I hope you're all very proud of. It's quite beautiful, and those are, but that kind of bucolic look of a New England common is just that's just got to be catnip to a developer. So I think there's a lot that Grafton has for it that can show. The school numbers are good. It's got a good school system that has pretty good numbers as far as DESI compliance and all that stuff goes. It's reasonably well funded and above net school spending, and there's a long-term commitment on the part of the community to doing that. It's been my experience that developers who are looking to bring in business, especially a larger business, really take a hard look at the school system and want to see that there's that kind of commitment and that sort of that strategic alignment that they'll get that shows that they'll be able to get the workforce that they need. The basic demographics of Grafton, it's a varied community, has a wide range of incomes. I'd say probably averages around the middle, but there's wealthy and there's working class and so on, and in a wide range of housing stock and so on. So they've got a lot going for you, and I think there's probably a lot of upside risk, upside opportunity there too.
Okay. All right. You mentioned next week you're going to be at the JLMC.
Yeah.
What has been your involvement with collective bargaining in New Bedford? But I'm curious what when you were in Pennsylvania, whether you had collective bargaining responsibilities there.
I did.
So what's been your level of participation in collective bargaining?
In Pennsylvania, I was the primary, along with our lawyer, I was the primary negotiator. I negotiated with police and General Employees Union. I did at least 2 contracts when I was in Pennsylvania, maybe 3. You're right not to ask about Virginia. Virginia is a right to work state, so there's no public sector bargaining there, although that is changing from what I understand. And here in New Bedford, I'm part of the negotiating team. I work with our public employee committee, we call our PEC, on healthcare benefits. We're not part of the GIC. We have our own health plan, and I work again with our labor lawyers on our negotiations, especially with fire and police and so on. I don't get too involved with schools, of course, because that's that's the school division. They kind of do their thing. Although I will help them a little bit on some of the ability to pay stuff. The hearing I'm preparing for next week is a fire arbitration. We have a police one coming up. I've already been through those a couple times now, so I'm kind of used to them. But it's just a necessary part of the job. It's not the most enjoyable one. The important thing to do is to try to make sure that you treat it in a non-personal way, and that the staff that you're the employees themselves don't view it in a personal way, but understand it's about them trying to get their benefits, and you're trying to protect the interests of the town or the city, and hopefully they find a way for them to come together in confluence. Our police and fire unions tend to be a bit militant, so we have some times with them. I've always had good relationships with them on the side, though, once I can professional as I can make it.
In terms of your personnel, just general personnel management, do you set goals for your employees? Do you
Yeah.
evaluate the employees? What's the method you use to do that evaluation?
So we have the minimum requirement in New Bedford. We have a personnel system, evaluation system, and the minimum requirement is that we do annual reviews. We set goals at the beginning of the year, and then we do reviews based on those goals at the end of the year. They do a self-evaluation. That's the minimum, really. You know, I have monthly check-ins, now bi-weekly, maybe 3 weeks or so, check-ins with my department heads, get a sense of what's going on and what they're doing. We talk about stuff on the side. That's in addition to the normal staff meetings. My direct reports, my own staff. We have you know, quite a bit of interfacing we do in that sense. We don't right now. I've got a very good staff who I'm pretty much uniformly happy with, so I don't have any, you know, sort of major documenting issues and things like that. But we have in the past. And you know, progressive discipline is a useful exercise, requires a lot of patience, and you know, it needs to be done right and in a very careful way to make sure that, you know, you're protecting the interests of the organization. But it can be useful as well, and has on occasion led to a dismissal. Not too many, I'm proud to say. For the most part, I think people can be worked with, but you know, sometimes.
Yeah.
So and so, yeah, a lot of what I try to do is kind of interpersonally sort of interact and you know, give positive reinforcement and support and negative, you know, correction where it's necessary, and just try to keep going along. And then usually about 6 months into the year, we'll do a quick check-in. It won't be a formal document, but we'll do a check-in based on the goals and say, okay, how do we think we're doing this year so far, and kind of and talk that through. And then if there's any correction or adjustment needs to happen, or maybe this goal is not happening, let's catch up on that kind of thing. We you know, we identify those and move forward on that too.
How about that's exactly what I wanted to hear about was the issue of you know, one, you know, holding people accountable, evaluating them, and then dealing with disciplinary actions. What about the notion of developing your staff?
Yeah.
How have you gone about developing them to make them better?
Well, there's a formal aspect to it, the non-formal aspect. The formal aspect is that we have a development plan that goes with every performance appraisal every year. So we have in there development goals and things that we think that we identify mutually to do to kind of to improve that person's role in their job. But you know, development is also about succession management and developing staff in a way that, you know, they'll be able to step in when somebody goes, because nobody stays forever. And you want to make sure that your organization is robust and has high survivability and possible success. So part of what I really look for in my direct reports also is to make sure that they are developing their subsidiary staff, you know, in the event that sometimes they may have to go, or they may need to step away for a while and have someone fill in or whatever. And that's been a very useful circumstance. I mean, that's actually been a real world necessity for us. You know, as you know, about a year ago, New Bedford was on the news, was hit by a cyber attack, and it was a major attack, but we survived it. We did a lot of our IT staff did fantastic work, you know, recovering and rebuilding our systems. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we had multiple staff who were capable of functioning at a high level, and can really focus on the larger picture issues when it comes to IT work. And you know, redevelopment of the servers, and that we're rebuilding servers, and you know, pulling the backups and so on, and then rebuilding our network. And you know, it was an impressive feat on their part. It was really good work that they did, and I think that has something to do with the fact that we, you know, really worked on development over the years before. So you know, it's just really important that an organization to function has that kind of level of redundancy and robustness to it, because you never know what's going to come along.
Does IT fall under you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that rebuild that they had to do,
yeah.
Let's talk about that. That's, you know, what I'm interested in talking about or hearing about is a project that you've managed from, there's probably a multitude, but I was going to use that one, but you can choose a project of your liking, in terms of what if we were, we have a number of projects in Grafton that are being talked about, they're talking about the reorganization of the fire department, a library expansion, a village strategic plan, zoning project. So there's projects that are always be coming at you as a town administrator. What projects have you, would you point to? What does that, how have you managed those projects? What's your manner of style?
So in addition to the recovery from the cyber attack, I mean, one of doing a little more positive, because that was defensive,
Okay.
but a little more positive. We in the process of finishing the new South Public Safety Center. It's the city's first public safety center in 50 years, first new public safety center. It was a project that started from a strategic study that we did, which the mayor commissioned of the fire rescue system. Then turned led to some recommendations regarding possible consolidations of stations and realignment of some locations. It's the result of that, this project that we did, it combined a police station, two fire stations, and then 2 other facilities as well. So 5 facilities altogether into a single campus located in the south end of the city. It took an old derelict church that was at the entrance to the south end, and tore that down. We're building this new beautiful public safety center, and it forestalled the need to renovate 5 different buildings. So we're quite proud of it. We did it for under $20 million. That included the land acquisition. So and that project required a lot of interdepartmental cooperation, to say the least. It involved the fire department, our EMS department, the police department, our facilities and fleet department, our public infrastructure department, like a public works department, our planning department, and probably our parks department and the mayor's office. And I was the coordinator of all of that. My job was really to be I was the internal manager to make sure the project kept moving. That happened probably because it was a CIP project and there's nobody else to do it. And I've had actual experience in public works departments before and other line departments, so it was something that I could do. The project started in 2016 as a study. We hired an OPM, company called Daedalus. The OPM, in turn helped us hire the architect. We went through the whole land acquisition process, pushed it through city council, which was, challenged several votes in city council, and got all the way to full approval. Broke ground in 2018, I think, late 2018 or early 2019. And it is nearly finished. It'll be open to the public probably by the beginning of fiscal 22. So I'm very proud of that. It's one of my biggest accomplishments here.
Good. We talked about your involvement with ICMA and GFOA, and so clearly you try to stay on top of current trends in municipal finance, municipal management. What trends excite you the most?
It's a good question, Bernie. I really enjoy government. I mean, I always have. I really, I like the ethic of it. And a day like today, it's particularly poignant to me to be meeting with all of you about this. I enjoy the kind of the value set that's involved in public service. My wife's in public service as well. She's a teacher. And the thing I like most about it is the whole concept, the way in which government, especially at the local level, which is the reason why I left federal and decided to focus on local in grad school. The reason why, especially the way that local kind of brings these services directly to the people's doorstep and delivers the things that they need. They can see what their return is. It's incumbent on us to show them that return, to show them how that works. And there are a number of really interesting structures out there, some which I've never been able to fully implement, but I really would love the opportunity to do them, that help people kind of understand how it is their government works and how they get the value for their money and where the dollars go and so on. Things like Budget Ballot, which is, I don't know if you've heard of that, it's a program they have in Dallas, Texas, where it's an online tool where people vote and they vote like how much they want to go to different functions. They can see how their budget is structured and how it works. It's really neat. The concept of real effective community visioning, where you bring the community together. I think a town meeting structure is an interesting format for that as well. But where you bring the community together and really focus on what its values are and what its needs are and what they're really looking for out of their government and out of their community. I just really like the idea of everything we can do to sort of bring government to the doorstep of the person. They can really see what it does for them and how they're best in it, because there's really been too much, in my mind, too much interference in the world right now, too much kind of chatter and noise that's creating these walls and barriers in between government and its constituents and people who receive those services. And it's really incumbent on us at the local level more than anything else to try to find ways to break through that.
Well, that's great, because you just went right into my next question. It's about citizen relations and government transparency. So let's start with the transparency part, because there's some interesting ideas. Certainly it relates to engagement, what you were just talking about with those ideas. A big part of community engagement, though, is that notion of transparency. What idea that you've given us ideas of other places? So what are some actions that you've taken in New Bedford or anywhere else to enhance transparency, that would be applicable here in Grafton?
So I'm very pleased by our record in New Bedford when it comes to transparency and sort of making what government does, especially on the financial side, open to the public. We have an open checkbook program. I don't know if Grafton has that. A number of jurisdictions around the state do, which is basically just a way to show on a quarterly basis. We show the ledger, what gets spent on different things, how much, what money spent on by department level. It's a homegrown system that we had our IT department put together. It's been very effective. We have a dashboard where we show major indicators. We're able to show people during snowstorms how many miles we managed to plow in the course of a storm and what that looks like. That's the kind of stuff that really shows people the value, the return on value. When I got to New Bedford, our budget document was pretty much just sort of a big ledger book that would go to the city council. The proposed budget would go to the city council. That's what they'd see in that. And that's pretty common in Massachusetts, unfortunately. The budget document should be more than just a financial document. It's really a resource planning document, and it should show what the organization's plans are for the year. So we have an adopted document, as I mentioned. It's received the GFOA award for 4 years in a row now, which marries our strategic goal plan with department goals and objectives and accomplishments and resource levels and performance measures, and shows how all that connects. We've done that with minimal minimal resources. Actually, I think most jurisdictions our size that had a full-blown performance measurement program would probably have a much larger performance management office and so on, budget office. I'm the budget office, and my two staff. So we've managed to kind of get quite a bit done from a management transparency standpoint, just with the small number of people that we have. So we're pretty proud of that.
How would you, if you came into Grafton, how would you kind of talked about this, I think, right at the beginning of your of our interview. How would you'd be walking in, a new kid in town. How would you relate to the citizens, and how would you build those relationships that you need to build?
So I'm going to also use this answer to kind of go a little bit off topic, if that's okay. I'm sorry, but it's tangential. I mentioned earlier the importance that I see in, or I alluded to anyway, the importance of making connections in the community. There are a lot of ways to do that, but the most important thing is for for the community to know that that I'm accessible and available. It's also really important as part of that accessibility to make sure the organization itself is accessible and available as well. And that's kind of where my slight tangent was going to go. I don't think I can overemphasize the importance of professional ethic. Professional ethic that involves customer service on the part of the staff. One of the things that I really want to see is one of the things I really want to see the organization move toward, if it hadn't already, is an understanding. I think that they're there as to serve the public and to provide the services. Also, the expectation that the professionalism that I expect them to have with each other and the organization to have with among itself, the same professionalism they should show to their customers, and the same professionalism, by the way, expect the customers to show to them. Sometimes residents can get a little bit surly, and you got to deal with that. But the idea, I do believe that you give as good as you get, and the importance of kind of building that feedback loop where people look at the town government and say, they kind of they got their act together. They know what they're doing. Yeah, maybe some things I disagree with, some things they're hearing from there, but they're competent. They understand how to keep the train running. It's a little boring, but it's incredibly important from a sustainability standpoint when it comes to the tougher decisions, especially.
Okay. In your role as CFO in New Bedford, what's your interaction with the school department?
All the time, the superintendent I meet I wouldn't say we meet all the time, but he and I probably see each other. Well, pre-COVID, we probably saw each other personally, maybe once a month or so. I have a very close relationship with the business manager. He and I interact a lot. That's probably who I work with the most. He's my interface when it comes to school finance questions, CIP, net school spending, all that stuff. I kind of work with him, but the superintendent and I have a pretty good relationship as well. And occasionally I'll have to give him a call about something here or there.
How is the city doing with net school spending?
We're low. Okay. We are a challenged jurisdiction when it comes to finances, and we've done a pretty good job of keeping the lights on and keeping things going, but we are always a little resource poor. Our new growth numbers are not great for a city our size. We've managed to retain a decent amount of untapped levy, but we pretty much budget at net school spending. The problem with budgeting at net school spending is that whenever you have healthcare savings or something like that, you always end up at around 98% of net school spending. So we put a couple of measures into place this year that are intended to try to ensure that we stay at 100% or above. One of the things that we've done is we took healthcare costs, medical claims costs, instead of having them in a separate department like we do for the whole city, we've assigned the school share directly to the school department. So if they have a savings coming, they'll be able to spend that money towards net school spending, things like that. We try to give them a little more time to that. And that's really, derived from the relationship that I have with the business manager. He and I have a good relationship. There's a level of trust there. And I know that he's going to try to do the right thing as far as getting the net school spending.
Okay, good. You're in your form of government with you really don't have, I don't think there's much in the way outside of the school that there is much interaction with other governmental entities. The sewer is probably, your sewer system is by the city. Is it it's not a regional system?
No. Or? We have a regional VOC. We have a VOC, the Vocational Technical School we deal with. I work with our neighboring jurisdictions with Dartmouth and Acushnet quite a bit. We have a lot of, Dartmouth and Fairhaven and Acushnet. We have a lot of, we have some shared issues that we deal with Fairhaven because of the harbor. We share the harbor. So that there's some involvement there. And we are a provider when it comes to water and sewer. We provide water and sewer to some of our neighbors as well, and we work with them on that
Any disputes over the feed,
all the time. Hate it.
Yeah.
If we hit them with a cola, we always get a complaint. Yeah.
What do you envision as your relationship with the select board, and so what would that look like, and how would you communicate with the board?
So I've taken a good look at your home rule charter and kind of try to get a sense of how you function and so on. I said a little bit about how I envision how I would think of my role in relation to the board at large. That I'm kind of your arm. I'm your operative actor, I guess. I think to do that effectively, there probably needs to be a certain level of trust and understanding and empowerment. I do believe in an empowered workforce. I think it starts at the select board level, moving on down. So that would mean organizational issues and things like that. Of course, nobody kept in the dark, but that there would be a desire. But I would hope that there would be an understanding that those types of that the reason that you hire the town administrators to kind of make those decisions and deal with that day to day. I would envision that I would try to keep the select board aware and understanding of what I was doing on a regular basis. I know, of course, there's a review process. I think beyond just the review process, it's important to lay out goals for the year. It's a really effective way. It's also an easy way for you to evaluate me. If we have the goals for the year, that's a good basis for evaluation, but really give us a concrete sense of what direction we want to be rowing in for the coming year and what we're trying to do. I think that's really important for everybody involved. My intention, honestly, would really try to make sure that there's harmony in terms of what select board as a corporate entity. Of course, there's going to be disagreements among you. What select board as a corporate entity wants to do, and the direction they want to go, and that there's clarity on that, so that the workforce is able to execute that direction as effectively as possible.
Board questions that people may have.
Yep, Bernie, thank you, if I may. All right, thank you. You answered a majority of my questions, and a lot of them were, just around your management with regards to other departments and what you oversaw. One of the things I have for you is that, in economic development, and I appreciate you identifying the North Grafton area is an area of interest for Grafton, but what is your thoughts on, you're coming from New Bedford, which has, a tourism destination, okay, it's on the water, you have multiple commercial assets, in New Bedford, what type of influences or what can you bring to Grafton that would further, existing plans that are in place today? Like what would be, that's what I'm looking for. What would be some of your strategies, I guess, that you would apply for Grafton that you would?
So obviously Grafton's not New Bedford, nor would it ever want to be. One of the advantages that a place like Grafton has compared to New Bedford, there's some disadvantages, of course, but one of the advantages is that you have a lot of greenfield and a lot of space that can be developed on a fairly large scale. I know there was talk about the UPS facility. I understand that may or may not be happening, but still the concept of a large development space is really good. Those are the, I know from my experience and from my conversations with my contacts at the state and so on that's greenfields are what the larger developers are really looking for nowadays. So one of the things I'd really want to do is really connect with mass development and get a sense of what they see as potential, because they have a lot of money right now for development of sites. And there's a really serious need for business park space. It seems like Grafton would be the kind of place that might be good for that. So that'd be one thing. I think it's important to maintain the character and the way of life that you have there. I think I spent I've done a couple visits to Grafton now, just my wife and I, just getting a sense of the community and how things look and everything. And it's a very special place. I think it's just a beautiful, central Massachusetts town, and you don't want to lose that. So you want to be careful. So I think having a master plan, strategic plan in place where you have a sense of what areas you're setting aside for development, what you aren't, make sure your zoning is strong and so on. The last thing you want to do is have a situation where someone comes in sort of, selling this vision that doesn't necessarily comply with what you want to do, but hey, your zoning would allow it. So, next thing you know, you got big boxes all along, all along up by the pike, So I think that's something that you need to make sure you do. It's, economic development on the commercial side especially is a long game. And it's really important to make sure that you've created the sandbox in a way that you want it to be, so that when someone comes along looking to play there, you'll be able to, you'll be able to put them in the right place and have the right, direct them the right way. Otherwise, that process can get away from you, and that development that you hoped for could be a real problem. So, those are all things you need to do. It takes a strong planning element, takes a strong strategic plan, a strong zoning plan, and so on. And maybe some thoughts about filling in the edges to things like, sign ordinances and form-based zoning, that stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions members may have? All right. Ari, do you have any closing comments you want to make, or anything you'd like to say?
I don't think so. I know you've had a long night, and I know you're anxious to get back on the news feed and find out what the hell's been going on out there for the past 3 hours. But I really do appreciate this opportunity. Again, I think whatever happens, as I say again, you really do have a lovely town, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to get a sense of, sort of experience it and get a sense of what's going on there and what the issues are. I think, and from what I've seen in this process, you've done a really good job of trying to identify a good candidate to help lead the town forward. So, thank you.
Great. All right, that's it. Ari, thank you for taking the time with us tonight, and it was very helpful. And I will be in touch.
Great.
Right.
Thanks very much. So, everybody.
Thank you, Ari.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ari.
All right, and that completes your candidates. So, Chair, any thoughts of how you want to proceed?
I wanted to open, this up for discussion tonight. Just, have the members take a moment to maybe make some reflections, some comments. I don't personally have a real formal procedure, Bernie, that I would want everyone to follow right at this moment, other than I just want to open this up to discussion and just kind of, hear from ourselves about how we felt the candidates go. Mr. Frisbee.
Peter, before we just get started with that, I just want to make sure I'm clear in my own head. Our process is to eventually move to vote that we enter into negotiations with a particular candidate, and then have an executive session at a later time to establish how that negotiation is going to take place.
Yeah, that's correct. So I consulted with Bernie last week about what the agenda items should look like, and there's possible action tonight if the board wishes to take, which would be to appoint, and then two, pending successful contract negotiations and so on and so forth. And in that process, due for if the committee felt for timing, we can have things set up in place. And then you're right. As we, we have a parameter that we've already established as the salary baseline, which I think was the big part that we did. I think, was it back in November, Bernie?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's correct. I'm just kind of rehashing everything out, Ed, just to, remind everyone just, where we are today with things. So, I mean, I left it pretty wide open. However, the board feels it wants to move tonight. So, yeah, we would vote to, I think what we say, we vote to appoint a candidate, and then pending successful contract negotiations, they would become hired as the TA.
Okay. Just for my part, I do want to, I haven't had a chance to do this yet, but I do want to thank the selection commission who was responsible for gathering the list of candidates. I want to thank Bernie and his team. You know, their role, Bernie's role was critical for us to be able to cast a wide net, to bring, I think, us 3 candidates who, as you saw throughout the course of the meetings, sort of had a different background and sort of had different skill sets. And the commission was very cognizant of the fact that we said we wanted 3. And there were, I think, at least 2 or 3 other people who could have easily made the cut to inside these top 3 candidates. And we had, I think, a really great discussion on the commission about, and actually the members did a great job of this, of breaking down the assets of each candidate, the skill set of each candidate, how they ranked them, how they valued them. And there was a fairly wide consensus about these particular 3. You know, Ari obviously is very sharp. I think he is very bright. I think that comes across very clearly. He comes from a background that's a little bit different. He's never been a top dog before, but he's a CFO in New Bedford. And I have absolutely no doubt that he could come right in here and do this job. I think the only concern I have with him, you know, he is new to the town form of government in Massachusetts, the whole town meeting thing. And there would be perhaps an additional learning curve there with him that you wouldn't have with a candidate who is a little bit more familiar with that. So, you know, there was that. And I know Josh had, you know, and Bernie can speak to this, has come highly recommended all throughout the Commonwealth as a result of all the work that he performed in Blandford. And, you know, taking them out of crisis, I think you have to remember how young he is too. I mean, when he came into that spot, this is 2012, this was 8 years ago. So he really came in and performed at a high level. Although it's at a smaller community, my feeling, and I said this to the commission, was, you know, that smaller community isn't his ceiling. I think his ceiling is much bigger than that. And he's sort of, you know, he's sort of that D3 player that's outperforming everything else out there. And I think, you know, we would be well served by him. My feeling is Evan is the entire package with what we're looking for. I think he's a tremendous personality fit, number one, who can come into the municipal center at a time where morale is probably not great. And I say it's not really even probably, I think we all know that it's been a rough year in there. It's been a year of a lot of change. And I think he brings a skill set where he can communicate with people, he can lead effectively, and he can do all the other check the box things that voters and Grafton residents like to talk about. Economic development, you know, trying to steer away from another override while at the same time developing a relationship with the school side, to work collaboratively with those guys to end up in a place that reflects our community's commitment to education. I think you mentioned education as a driver of economic development as well. So for me, you know, those are my sort of takeaways. I think each one of these guys actually left a little bit on the table. I think everybody was a little bit nervous. Josh, for instance, you know, when he was in the commission talking to us, he really dug into his planning background. He actually mentioned you get what you plan for, which I think is a great way to put it. And I think that's something we've been struggling to articulate on the select board and on finance committee over the past few years. The planning is the part of it. You get what you plan for. Evan had talked about hiring. He talked about, you know, accumulating talent within the municipal center and within that department. And he had mentioned, you know, what was his saying? You hire for talent, but you train for skill. So he really recognizes all of the individual assets and traits that people bring to their jobs in a municipal center that all at once can sometimes seem large and also at the same time seem very small. I think that his ability to really value the personal aspect of the service that people provide can maybe get us to a place efficiency wise and morale wise that we hadn't been before, and can really, you can demonstrate value to the community, I think, with that sort of soft leadership skill that I think really is important when you're within the walls of the municipal center. So that's where my head's at. You know, if I were to decide tonight, Evan would be my guy.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to go next? No visitor there. Mr. Often and Ms. Roy, did you want to go next?
I'm still trying to put my thoughts together to be as eloquent as Ed, but I'll say it's going to end in the same conclusion.
Mr. Often, do you want an opportunity? I can go if you need some more time, especially Ms. Roy.
Yes, I'm not sure I'm gonna be as articulate as that either, but I did just put together some pros and cons, I guess. I did think that personality wise, and kind of culture wise, Evan shined for sure. I think we do have a serious need to bring somebody in that staff in the municipal center want to work underneath and also alongside. And I think that's a really important element of this job title. So I thought he was very much people oriented. I liked, just his general collaborative approach. Some of the things that he brought in terms of identifying some of the gaps with the capital plan, building maintenance. I liked that he brought some of those things, introducing the capital plan, financial policies. He was pretty clear in the fact that he would take direction from the finance committee, which I liked. That he had a good relationship with them, had a good relationship with the board, obviously helped to bridge that gap with the schools. So there was a lot of really positive things for him. I didn't find him obviously as strong as Ari on the financials or on the budgeting process. I think both he and Joshua relied heavily on staff to do, manage financial operations. So, we interviewed somebody last night that I think has a very, very strong skill set. So I think we're in pretty good shape as far as that goes. But that definitely was a bit of a weakness for both Evan as well as Joshua. I'm gonna, I think, skip past Joshua because to me it really came down to Evan and Ari. Ari was very well practiced with his interview answers. I think he was extremely articulate, clearly a practiced hand at managing budgets, managing staff, very professional. I thought he was an excellent interview. I thought he was by far the most articulate of the three. He was very well researched on Grafton, which I was happy with and impressed with. He was really good with that part. Had great negotiation skills. Clearly, I liked his, commentary on just using a non-personal or impersonal approach with negotiating union contracts and whatnot. I really liked that. There were a couple of big cons for him, and this is where things get really difficult. It's all about trade-offs, right? So to me, clearly, he would need to be far more hands-on than he's been, in his recent positions. And so I have some concerns about that. You tend to get fairly specialized when you work in the urban environment versus in a small town like Grafton. So I have some reservations about his ability to actually have the breadth and get hands-on in so many different areas. I think a lot of his answers, because he has such a long career, he pulled from his experience in various positions throughout the 25, 30 years that he's been in municipal government. But he's never been in a position where he had to do all of those things at the same time. So that was one observation in terms of a con for him. I wonder also the best practices and the scaled processes that he's engaged with. In the urban environment, I wonder how those things translate to a mid-sized town like Grafton. So again, you know, the very professional. I think his expectations would be very high coming in. And, you know, see somebody that could come in, hit the boots, you know, boots on the ground running, and be able to, you know, take care of some of the needs in the municipal center, work through our budget, you know. I don't know. So I'm really back and forth on Ari and Evan. I think clearly Evan has only interviewed for this job. I think had he had more interview experience, he certainly would have had more succinct answers and, you know, to some of the questions. But I do think overall he was the strongest candidate out of the three, balancing all the different factors.
Thank you. Ms. Roy, are you ready? Do you need some more time?
I can go. For Ari with me, some of the things that I like was that he's worked with a community that was transitioning out of become an agricultural community to a bigger one. He mentioned how he's customer service oriented, which was absolutely one of our goals this year at our goals retreat. For Josh, he's really into planning, and you know that was really important to be proactive rather than reactive. He mentioned filling vacancies would have been a priority for him if he were to get the job here. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I felt like Evan was the strongest candidate. You just couldn't miss his passion for this. It was just oozing out of him. His leadership style seemed interesting and kind of what we need right now in Grafton. And he has experience with HCAs, which I also thought was important considering everything going on right now in Grafton.
Thank you. So a lot of you had hit upon a lot of the points I've written down on all my notes here tonight. So I'm going to try to get just some of the points that none of you mentioned. I will say that, you know, wow, you guys have hit on everything. So I'm struggling right now I don't want to repeat anybody. I will say that out of the three candidates, I too felt, you know, between Evan and Ari, those two would be, you know, my top two choices. Although I will say, to Mr. Frisbee's point, Joshua's got a very good career in front of him. I know, you know, reading on what he did at Blandford was no easy task. And I think that type of experience about dealing with crises, you know, is going to go a long way. In evaluating, you know, that comparison between Evan and Ari, I look at Ari as having somebody who is accustomed to having more structure, more supports, and department heads that are knowledgeable in the area in his experience of management, especially over the past few years. And I feel that, you know, where I'm leaning more towards Evan as well, that Evan has a good, well-rounded experience that I think Grafton needs, knows how to leverage key stakeholders within departments to fulfill maybe areas that, you know, not everyone can do everything, you know, for the town. Otherwise, we would just hire one person to do everything, right? And hearing how he would leverage, you know, department heads in his style, I think would be, to your point, Ms. Roy, very welcoming, you know, and I think, you know, not to repeat a lot of what you guys had said, I agree with everything. HCA experience, I thought that was very, you know, mindful, and the fact that, you know, all three of them, you know, understood the importance of budgeting and that it needs to be a collaborative approach. I think Evan's approach, I asked that question specifically, and I was happy to hear his response to how he would welcome, if one of us were to have some, you know, in-depth questions and we want to bring it up to a meeting, that was something that he was, you know, completely open to. And I think that's the type of encouragement that this town needs, especially for, you know, we've got a lot of volunteers that do a lot of work, you know, for the town, on behalf of the town. And they're deserving of someone who would be open to their questions, their concerns, and their counsel. So that's all I have. I think at this point I've kind of kept a tally on everything here. So, you know, I've heard a consistent name from all four of us. What at this point is the board feel ready to want to take a motion? I did draft some brief language in the agenda tonight. I don't know, how do you guys want to go about doing that?
I'd like a motion, I think.
Okay, Mr. Prisby?
I don't have the language in front of me. I forgot to pull up my agenda. Do you have it in front of you, Peter?
Yeah, so basically it would be vote to select and appoint town administrator pending successful contract negotiation.
Okay, I move that we vote to appoint Evan Broussard as our candidate for town administrator pending successful contract negotiation.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Off tonight.
Mr. Prisby,
Yeah,
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried 4-0. All right, so the next course of business, I'll have Mr. Lynch reach out to all the candidates and again, thank them on our behalf. He'll notify Mr. Broussard about the news and our decision tonight. Next is, in the process of just moving this along to allowing this to happen sooner rather than later. Could you, did the board want to just move to, authorize to, enter into contract negotiations with the selected TA, or did you want to hold off on that?
we want to, is that a conversation we want to have an executive session first, or does it matter?
That was
It
going to
doesn't
be my
matter.
question.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. We'll still have to have executive session to go over all the parameters and that will be, discussed there, obviously. And eventually, once things are settled, it will come out of executive session into open session and be ratified in an open meeting.
So for me, I'd like to go into executive session and talk about the process before we start negotiations.
Okay. So the next time that we would be able to do that would be next week. All right. All right, so that's at that point. Is there any other discussions or conversations that we need tonight? Mr. Prisby?
I do want to mention one thing, in case people are wondering, Ms. DeFazio just couldn't be with us tonight. I don't know if we mentioned that at the go. She had indicated to us that she was fine with us having this discussion without her. We do miss her, we wish she were here, but this was something she was okay with us moving on with.
Mr. Prisby, yeah, thank you for that. I did receive a text message from her. She said it was okay to release this information. Mr. Fazio was in a ski accident a few days ago and really, got injured pretty badly. And she's recovering now, but she wanted to also assure, that she felt comfortable with us moving forward. And she, regrets not being able to be here for, these few meetings that we've been having. I think I speak on behalf of all of us. We wish her for a speedy recovery and she comes back as soon as she's ready. Thank you for bringing that back up, Mr. Prisby. But yeah, that is the reason why Mr. Fazio couldn't attend even yesterday and today. Yeah. All right, any other discussions or actions the board wants to take? All right, I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made second to adjourn. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Tonight.
Mr. Prisby,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you next week.